In the hall, decorated around the perimeter, with luxurious golden decorative elements, two young people sat on opposite sides of the table, drinking tea. Getting straight to the point, the guy snapped that his partner could never replace tea. This boy, Wilhelm Hunt, was the protagonist's fiancé, and he was supposed to join her family. It seemed like the engagement went smoothly, but it didn't. The girl really didn't understand what Wilhelm was trying to say with this. If the man had told the fiancé this before the engagement, it would have been much easier to separate. Confident that he could give his fiancée everything she desired, Wilhelm had no intention of leaving. However, it was important for him that the girl knew his heart belonged to someone else. The princess was surprised by this information and didn't understand how she could stoop so low. Lord William not only allowed himself to be rude, setting an example of a gentleman, but he also proudly declared that he wanted to become Tasha's lover. The girl was even more surprised to learn that Wilhelm didn't care if his wife also had a lover, and Tasha has no idea about anything and is the boy's unrequited love. This was a particularly reckless act on Wilhelm's part. In fact, everything happening was in a game world called Her Men. The events took place at the academy in a fantasy universe. The objective of the game is to make choices and increase affection. This is a normal dating simulator with various characters and different endings. The problem is that Karina Pioneer, whom the girl possesses, is a minor character. The description said she was much more beautiful and richer than Tasha, but reality was not like that. Thanks to the setting, the main character became beautiful like a fairy, and everyone loved her, and Karina remained a puppet, against whom Tati looked even better. Until the original game ended, everything was tolerable. Karina simply lived quietly, despite the main issue still being relationships. Daniel, the Duke Malfurion's son, was the girl's first boyfriend, whom they intended to marry when the children were still in the womb. He was a handsome, kind, and well-mannered young man, and he claimed to be the main character of the game. However, when the couple grew up, Daniel couldn't marry the girl, choosing Tasha as his fiancée instead. Tasha was Karina's friend, and she hoped this wouldn't affect their friendship in any way. She chose the main character, and the game ended. Karina assumed she wouldn't be mentioned in the original anymore, but the next suitor to win her heart was the owner of the Magic Tower. Raymond Carcel, the handsome man, was one of the contenders for the main character, and Karina thought that if Tasha chose Daniel, then she could be with this boy, but soon Raymond also chose the heroine's friend. After that, the girl started communicating only with minor characters, and soon fell in love with the eldest son of one of the petty viscounts. During all this time, Karina couldn't settle down in this world, and he became the only one who made her happy. Days, weeks, months passed, and the princess's next boyfriend visited Tasha again. In this world, even high status, beautiful appearance, and skills cannot compare to the title of the main character. Karina had already started thinking that her friend would deliberately be seduced by her boyfriends. But it turned out that this man was from an ordinary family. Andrew Lovron Gloucester was the current emperor's half-brother and the only missing member of the imperial family. Naturally, the main character will always be close to a member of the imperial family. Almost immediately after the breakup, Karina heard the news about Tasha's wedding. And Andrew's. The game was completed 3 years ago. Tasha got married, and it seemed that now the girl would definitely not be mentioned, and everything would be fine, but Karina stepped on the same rake again. She approached Daniel and confidently poured a cup of tea over his head. The girl was no longer going to tolerate such an attitude, and promised that he would have to pay for all his words. The next day, a solemn act took place in the kingdom, attended by a large number of guests from different classes. Karina also attended the celebration, but annoyed by the conversation with her fiancé, she couldn't fully enjoy the atmosphere. She was stabbed in the back again. Everyone around her gossiped about the girl and her failed marriage, considering Karina obsessed with men. She didn't want to come here either, but there was no other option since her father had gone abroad, and the presence of a representative of the pioneer was mandatory. Suddenly, a clear female voice was heard behind Karina. Tasha was calling the girl. She learned from Lord William that they were married and made an inappropriate joke that she wouldn't take her friend's fiancé away. Secular society, obsessed with discussing other people's lives, believed that Karina and the Archduke were completely different, like light and shadow, and unlike the girl, the boy was simply an angel. Tatiana always behaved this way, pretending to be innocent and making her friend laugh, thus turning her into an unhappy maid of honor. Karina informed the girl that Wilhelm didn't care about her marriage, and that becoming Tasha's lover would be a great honor for him. Tasha, in turn, said that during the meeting with Wilhelm, they joked that there would be rumors about their romantic relationship, and the boy said he didn't care about gossip. Karina was impressed and suggested to the girl that she could also meet her husband alone. Since they were best friends, the Duchess of Gloucester reached out her hand to the girl, intending to say that she had misunderstood everything. But Karina pulled her back and slapped her palm with her palm. The servant called the pioneer's representative to the emperor. And this was more timely than ever, because the girl almost burst with indignation. The servants presented the Archduke Pioneer to the emperor and announced that Princess Karina had arrived in his place. The girl greeted His Majesty and, lifting her head, saw the young man for the first time. This guy is an Iron and Blood Lord who has committed brutal murders of rebels and their families, a tyrant who doesn't have a shred of humanity in him. The man looked more harmless than the girl thought. Moreover, he was incredibly handsome, and he was Tasha's first love in the game. It was clearly worth it. Karina remained silent for a while, and after the emperor asked her what the girl was thinking, she said she was surprised by his extraordinary beauty. She was not afraid of the man at all, despite those who had heard of him trembling with fear. The girl had been through similar things, so she understood that meeting a person on her own was much more important than drawing conclusions about him from conversations. If rumors were to be believed, Karina is a wanton woman obsessed with men. The emperor greatly enjoyed talking with the girl and told her directly. While having a cup of tea, they chatted all night, and the guy was very impressed with the conversation. Finally, he decided to ask Karina a question. If the place next to her is still free, would she like to become his fiancé? Karina was impressed by such an unexpected proposal and replied that the emperor would still find a much better passion than her. The girl planned to return home immediately after the audience, but the man asked her not to run away, since there would be an important announcement before the end of the banquet. Karina returned to the celebration and, to her misfortune, was spotted by Lord William. He spoke to the fiancé as if nothing had happened. The girl reminded him that their relationship was destroyed by his fault, so she was not obliged to report what she discussed with the emperor, let alone communicate anything with the fiancé. Karina publicly announced that she demanded a divorce after he confessed that he wanted to become the lover of the Archduchess of Gloucester, which sparked even greater public interest. The boy was angry because the fiancé decided to dishonor him in public and attack the girl with all his might. Karina closed her eyes, preparing for the blow, and was already planning how she would blame her fiancé for all the troubles, and she would destroy the family of Marquis Hunt. Suddenly, out of nowhere, Andrew appeared, grabbing the attacker's hand. If Wilhelm had hit Karina once, she would have deprived him of all his funds, and then she would have disgraced him throughout secular society, so that he would be ashamed to appear in public. And in the end, she would have destroyed his reputation, of his entire family. But for some reason, Andrew intervened in the conflict. The girl thanked the Archduke, and without developing the dialogue further, hurried away. She drained her glass of wine in quick sips, thinking about what had happened and the insignificance of her fiancé. Karina didn't understand where she crossed Tasha's path. She didn't care about Wilhelm at all. But if the girl started dating someone else, her friend would definitely get involved. The princess wondered if there was a man in the world whom Tasha wouldn't like. When she caught the reflection of the emperor in the mirror out of the corner of her eye, they looked into each other's eyes, and Karina blushed. The man asked her to wait and not get drunk, but it seemed something went wrong. The girl thought the emperor had finally come to make an announcement, but in reality, there was no announcement. If the boy hadn't tricked Karina, she would have left immediately. His Majesty asked the princess how he could make up for the wait, and Karina started to refuse. When she suddenly saw Tasha staring at them, the girl assumed her friend was jealous because she was next to her first love, and she asked the emperor to cling to her. The boy perfectly understood what was happening, which is why he didn't reject Karina. Tasha left, and the girl thanked the emperor for playing along. Karina suddenly thought that he might be different from other men. The girl noticed that he was very handsome, especially when he smiled. She told the boy that maybe they should really start a relationship, but immediately recovered. The emperor might have thought the girl was crazy, since unintentionally, she rejected him and now offered to date him. However, the boy, on the contrary, was glad that the princess changed her mind. If they start a relationship, someday he will be able to marry her and then try to become the best man for her. Karina woke up in her bed, remembering the previous night and assuming it had all just been a dream. Seeing the countless gifts the emperor gave her, the girl finally realized that what had happened was real. Furthermore, the emperor handed over an invitation letter to the palace, stating that he hoped the girl's opinion would not change overnight. Karina was scared. If she said she had changed her mind, the emperor might get angry, and rumors would spread around her again, this time on a larger scale. And most importantly, Archduchess Tasha would laugh at her, because she is the main protagonist, not a princess. Karina was distracted from her thoughts by the servants showing off the emperor's gifts: Florian linen that the Duchess of Gloucester couldn't get, a perfume that only imperial family members could buy, and other things that the princess eventually liked. Above all, Lily, Karina's personal maid, was happy for the princess. It was clear that His Majesty really liked the girl. Opening the doors, the girl's father appeared in the threshold of the Pioneer Palace. The man returned very suddenly. In an orderly tone, he instructed his daughter to urgently come to his office. The seal on the things belonged to the imperial family, and the Archduke Pioneer embarrassed Karina about the fact that, being an unfree lady, she received gifts from the emperor. The girl told her father that she was going to divorce Hunt, and the Archduke became even angrier, thinking that his daughter wouldn't make such a decision without good reasons, and perhaps it was about Archduchess Tasha again. The father somewhat lowered his ardor. Unfortunately, this was not for long, as the girl said that Lord William was going to become the Archduchess's lover. And the man blushed again, slamming his hand on the table furiously. He admitted that perhaps everything happened because of his fault, and promised that Marquis Hunt would shower the girl with gifts from head to toe. So if she wants something in return, let her speak. Karina wished for Wilhelm Island. The territory was abandoned now, but with the salt from these islands, the family could open a perfume factory. Before the resettlement, the girl really liked this game. She watched the endings of all the main characters. And above all, she liked the ending with Wilhelm. Sabin Island, which belonged to him, was located in a place where no human had ever set foot. And from the salts of the sea washing the island, absolutely any aroma could be extracted, and they could also be used as bath products. The heroes started selling bath scents. This was their main product, which was called Tasha's fragrance, and as a result, Wilhelm gained wealth and authority. Of course, now the process of their development stopped, since Tasha chose someone else. Hunt had growth prospects, so now it was necessary to cut off all opportunities from the beginning, because building a successful business on taken lands would be very troublesome for Wilhelm. The Pioneer family had a lot of money, so the father had no problem letting his daughter do whatever she wanted. He didn't even care if the girl liked the emperor. Karina showed Lily what her father gave her to cheer her up. It was the same blank check on which any value could be entered. Since the girl no longer had friends, she invited the maid to go with her to the boutique to choose clothes for a meeting with the emperor. Lily was very happy with the offer and agreed to help Karina with her choice. Karina was stressed by the critical glances of people and was also afraid of running into her ex, so she didn't go anywhere during all this time. But now people weren't bothering her. On the street, a man blocked the way of the girls. The boy was Karina's second ex-fiancé, Raymond Carcel. The girl asked him to get out of the way and not interfere, but it turned out that Raymond also decided to visit this place. Karina had no idea that he had a passion for luxury women's clothing boutiques. Being a devoted admirer of Tasha, he came to buy a gift for the girl, and sarcastically declared that clothes from that place did not suit Karina. Lily intervened in the conversation. She was outraged that the young man was talking to the princess like that, but Karina managed to convince the maid that he was not worthy of her attention. Manager Fury greeted the girls at the boutique. All the famous boutiques on the street received a message from His Majesty. He asked them to buy something special for the princess. The emperor ordered to look at Karina's previous purchases in this boutique and choose a gift according to her preferences. Of course, the girl was very pleased with the man's attitude, but she thought it was too much. The princess said those words while drunk, and he was so worried about her that Karina even felt embarrassed. The inspired Lily fluttered around the girl, looking for the most suitable outfit, and finally made her decision. Passionately convincing Karina that the emperor had fallen in love, Lily stopped in the middle of her sentence. But not only Lily stopped, but everything around her froze. Raymond appeared in the room. He was the only one using temporary magic so openly. Having been in a relationship with Karina for only 6 months, Raymond dared to think he knew the girl better than she did, to which she replied that the boy was a pathetic loser, running after a married woman, and giving Tasha all the money from the magic tower. Raymond got angry and, using his magical abilities, froze the girl, after which he ordered her to beg for forgiveness on her knees. Karina was furious. If the boy had poured out a little more magic, the other mages would have immediately arrested him, which the girl made clear to her former fiancé. The boy noticed that Karina had changed a lot and disappeared into space. Time started moving as usual again, and the girl went to try on the clothes. After lunch, a carriage arrived from the palace to pick up Karina. After completing the journey, the girl got out of the carriage and was surprised. In front of her was not the emperor's personal palace, as the man wanted to hold the meeting in an important place. The location was the Winter Palace, where Aster lived during his time as a prince. The grounds were private, so the only woman who had been here was the empress. The emperor treated Karina too well. It was a disaster. The girl couldn't tell him that she had made a mistake while drunk. The boy found her on the street, and surprised, Karina pressed her back against the column. The emperor held out his hand to her, and the girl returned hers in response. Aster was a little confused, as this was their first date. Aster didn't know Karina's preferences, so he put different sweets on the table. The girl didn't love sweets, but she wanted to try everything. The emperor poured his favorite bitter tea into the cups, neutralizing the sweetness, reminding the girl of the incident with the alcoholic beverage. He understood that Karina was worried about the family's reputation and things like that, but he hoped she hadn't changed her mind about their relationship. In this world where everything is decided by the main character, Aster turned out to be the biggest victim. Because Tasha, loved by everyone, got married, imperial power became completely focused on him. Aster was emperor, but he had no influence, so to maintain his title, he decided to destroy all disobedient aristocrats, after which people called him the emperor, sitting on a bloody throne. He is a very famous person throughout the state, and marrying the daughter of Archduke Pioneer will help protect his image. Even though Karina was drunk and made a mistake, the emperor was still kind to her. The girl didn't understand what he really wanted. Aster said that he really wanted to be with her. If Karina sided with him, then Archduke Pioneer could become his ally, and the boy himself would help the girl take revenge on Tasha, so the offer was really good. The emperor knew what was going on between the friends. He thought Karina was too kind, because she maintained her friendship with the Archduchess even after what she did. But that day, his eyes filled with a desire for revenge, and the boy noticed it. The girl didn't want to cause trouble for Aster, but he swore by the title of emperor that he would always be on her side spiritually and politically, and he wanted her to use his help, in which case, Karina promised that she would do everything possible to become his favorite girl. Before going to bed, during a conversation with Lily, the princess noticed that she and the emperor had a lot in common, and the maid fully approved of the girl's choice. At that moment, Lily was cleaning the room and found a bracelet that Karina had since she was 10. The girl looked at the decoration and remembered her first dark story. The main character of her dark story was Daniel, who traded the girl for Tati. He was her fiancé since childhood, and once gave the girls identical bracelets under the pretext of friendship. Even as a child, Karina thought that Daniel liked Tasha. At that time, the original was still ongoing, and she was very unhappy about it. The bracelet in the girl's hands shone strangely, but she decided it was her imagination. Lily assumed the bracelet was cursed and asked the princess to give it to her to burn. Karina decided to keep the jewelry just in case and put it on the nightstand. Marquis Hunt was very angry with his son. He crumpled a piece of paper and walked resolutely towards him. Despite Wilhelm's excuses, the father knew that the Archduchess was his son's first love. The boy tried again to show the man that there was a misunderstanding between him and his fiancée when his father gave Wilhelm a resounding slap. Enmity with the Pioneer family would bring a lot of trouble to the Hunts. Therefore, ordering Wilhelm to apologize to the girl, the father threw his son out the door. The boy had a rather strange relationship with Tasha for a long time, more than friends, but less than lovers. Unrequited love, of course, and if he let her go, everything would end. That's why, after Tasha got married, Wilhelm tried to forget everything. The parents introduced the young people, and Wilhelm married for the good of the family and success. However, the wedding passed and they never saw each other, and after the engagement, Tasha got involved with the boy. They met after a long time, and the girl was still beautiful. Tasha said that if Wilhelm got married, They could see each other much more often, because both would be married. And no one would have questions. Wilhelm thought that Tati wanted him to become her lover. But his relationship with Karina only worsened when the girl stopped communicating with Hunt. At all costs, the boy decided that he must not allow the divorce. Karina and Lily smelled different scents, because the princess really wanted to start her own business. She was no longer going to trust men and marry, but decided to distract herself and focus on work. The girl was grateful to the emperor for wanting to side with her, but she still couldn't trust him. The people around were again talking about Karina. The girl was supposedly running after the emperor, or generally dating two at the same time. That's what they thought. Lily asked the princess not to pay attention. The girls around her only felt envy. Every time, Karina pretended not to know anything and ignored them. After thinking for a while, the princess quickly headed towards the girls. She made it clear to them that she had heard every word and told them how everything really was, so that the girls would start telling the correct rumors. The fiancés apologized and shamefacedly hurried away. Karina invited the maid to go to the Nivea store. It had become popular lately, and in fact, the place would be good for the princess's business. Tasha and Daniel approached the girl. The Archduchess did not expect to see her old friend in such a place. Silence hung in the air, embarrassing. Daniel asked the princess to return his greeting. Karina told the maid to wait a little and not let anyone into the room. Lily prepared a tray. If Duke Malfurion or Duchess of Gloucester started pressuring the girl, the maid would already be ready. Tasha asked her friend if the rumors that the girl had approached the emperor were true, but Karina only found it funny that she asked about Aster. The princess said that Tati felt strange only because she couldn't take her friend's man. The Archduchess tried to justify herself, saying she was only worried that her friend had misunderstood her. And Vil, but the girl stood firm. She believed that if a married woman appeared with another man, everyone would consider her a walker. Karina drew attention to Daniel Malfurion. Because she and Tasha were friends since childhood, the boy continued to run after her like a puppy even after her marriage. The first person who betrayed the princess and left a wound in her heart. The girl asked Tasha not to interfere in her relationship with Aster anymore and apologized for calling him by his name, explaining that she calls him that in private and that it had become a habit, although it wasn't true. In the end, since such a conversation took place, Karina decided to speak. The girl did not consider these people her friends because they did nothing when dirty rumors were spread about her. Despite Karina's deep grievances, Tasha decided that they were still friends and offered to make peace. Friends, this word caused a storm of emotions in the princess, and with decisive force, she pushed away Tati's outstretched hand, without intentionally breaking the girl's bracelet. The Archduchess immediately panicked to pick up the broken beads from the floor. Daniel promised to buy the girl a new bracelet, but this option didn't suit her at all. Tasha only needed this one. Tasha said it was too much and ran out of the room hysterically. When Daniel followed the girl, Lily entered the room with a tray in her hands. Burning with anger, the maid was eavesdropping on the whole conversation, barely restraining herself from hitting the guests with the dishes. Everything that happened between these two was a complete disgrace. Karina was glad she hadn't married Daniel. A strange sound caught the girl's attention. On the floor, she noticed and picked up a bead that had fallen from Tati's broken bracelet. While the object was in Karina's hands, the affection level floated above Daniel's head with a value of 64%. And it only grew over time. Exactly the same interface was in the original game. Tasha immediately approached the girl and took her hand. Lily still had the tray ready, but Karina asked them to leave and not let anyone in. Tati tried to snatch the bead from the princess's hands, but she just sneered. Moving her palm aside, she signaled Karina to take the girl's things. In fact, she had no intention of taking anything, so she finally returned the object to the owner. She didn't need someone else's, unlike Tasha. The Archduchess was worried that her friend had seen everything and asked the girl about it. The princess pretended not to understand what Tati was talking about, but in the end, she revealed her cards. She was interested in how the girl seduced her exes with the help of a bracelet. Each of her engagements was broken because of Tasha, and for the girl it was just a game. She acted so vile all this time, and now she dared to be jealous of a staff. However, in addition to this, the Archduchess also declared that the emperor was special, and her feelings for him too. Karina saw Daniel at the door. It seemed like he was eavesdropping, and this was an excellent reason for a provocation. The princess told Tati that all her men would someday marry, become other women's husbands, and they would forget about her. But the girl didn't think so. Loudly, she said that all these boys were hers from the beginning, and she would not allow anyone to take them away. Of course, Daniel heard all this, disappointed by his beloved's words. He could only say her name and nothing more. A tear rolled down the boy's face, and without waiting for tea, he left the room. Today the girl had to return home alone. Karina assured the Archduchess that over time everyone else would see her true colors. But even though the girl was defeated today, she still claimed that she was special. Unlike the princess, the pioneer invited the girl to smile, as she used to, because she didn't have much time to rejoice. Rivals were about to meet at the festival. Karina was not only angry with Tasha and the men who betrayed her, but she was also worried that the problem was her. She imagined knocking out to tea, since she wasn't the only one who had such a bracelet. In appearance, the jewelry looked normal. There was a possibility that Karina's bracelet had no power. Perhaps increasing the affection level is the only goal of the game, but despite all her efforts, she failed to seduce a staff. The girl was writing something with a pen on a piece of paper, thinking that soon-to-tea would be in her place. Karina felt a little vulgar in her outfit, but Lily reassured her. It was perfect for teaching this terrible lady a lesson. There is no empress in the country, and the first slow dance was always danced by a pair of archdukes, so all the attention used to fall on Tasha. Karina always avoided such events because she didn't want to see her, but now everything was different. The bracelet on the girl's hand looked a bit childish, but this was an opportunity to find out if it had powers. At the festival, Aster was bored among secular society, indulging in memories of the princess, and waiting for her arrival. Duke Malfurion greeted the emperor. He looked a little annoyed, and Aster thought that a man who had everything written on his face shouldn't be a politician. The man asked the duke what kind of relationship he had with Karina, and then replied that they had been best friends since childhood. But remembering that the girl was dating the emperor, he clarified that they were still nothing more than friends. Seeing how Daniel clung to the Archduchess under the status of a friend, Aster wondered what this word meant to a boy. Daniel thought it must have been very difficult for Karina, and he hadn't worried about her all this time. The emperor asked the boy to be more careful in the future, because he was not as kind as the princess. Suddenly, a clear female voice was heard next to the boys, as it usually happened. Tasha found herself next to the male representatives. While the girl was talking to the emperor, Daniel noticed that she had repaired the bracelet, and it looked very insincere. Until now, for the duke, it remained a mystery what happened that day. After what happened, every time he saw Tati he felt sick. The girl told Aster that coincidentally it was her birthday, and she was waiting for congratulations from the boy. He congratulated her, but noticed that her husband apparently paid little attention to her. Looking at the emperor with puppy eyes, Tasha asked for their first dance as a gift. Aster didn't have time to say a word when Andrew Gloucester appeared in the line of sight of the people. The guy pulled his wife back. The Archduke apologized to the emperor for his wife's clumsiness, but in reality, he had nothing to apologize for. Finally, Aster affirmatively asked Tati not to interfere with him in her chaotic relationship anymore. Karina heard a noise. Wilhelm was running with all his might because he really wanted to talk to the girl. The butler blocked the guy's way. Duke Andrew told him that if Lord William suddenly appeared, the man could safely throw him out the door. Obviously, the boy's control over his emotions was not good. He clenched his fist and attacked the servant. Karina, worried about the butler, and also realizing that the conversation would happen someday anyway, asked the man to step aside. The girl decided to test the effect of the bracelet. As expected, the affection level approached 0. Karina was sure that their conversation had ended last time at the banquet, and she didn't understand what else the boy wanted to achieve. The numbers on Wilhelm's affection score continued to decrease. The girl reminded him that he had lost his mind and was ready to use violence. Barely containing his anger, the lord apologized to the fiancé and admitted he was wrong. Since the boy sincerely repented, Karina accepted his apologies, but still asked him to leave. It was impossible to let the girl go under any circumstances, so Wilhelm grabbed the princess by the hand and began to persuade her to stop the divorce proceedings. After all, this would be the 4th consecutive breakup, and maybe no one would want to marry a woman after this. However, Karina was not inspired by his words. The girl didn't even accept the boy's offer to escort her one last time, knowing that all this happened because Tasha found out about the divorce, and she didn't want to see the lord again. Wilhelm noticed a bracelet on Karina's hand, exactly the same as the one Tasha was wearing, and decided that the girl wanted to be like her, so that the Lord's feelings would change. The boy crossed all kinds of lines, and the butler threatened to call the guards if he started insulting the princess again. Wilhelm's affection began to increase. It seems the Lord truly believed that Karina started imitating Tasha to influence him. Karina thought she should take the bracelet to the banquet to check the emperor's affection level. Thanks to it, she could say anything to increase the man's affection. The princess's bracelet also had power, but still, the girl decided not to use it and asked Lily to put the jewelry in the room. Entering the hall, Karina sensed a strange atmosphere. Daniel was sad, and Tasha and Andrew looked like they had fought a couple of minutes ago. As always, only the emperor shone with happiness when he greeted the girl. This is how it feels when someone is genuinely happy for you. The princess asked Asta why he was so cheerful and whispered something in his ear as she approached. The emperor welcomed everyone present at the party and hoped that on that day the guests could forget about hard work and rest enough. All of Karina's thoughts were occupied by Tasha. Perhaps the girl also came here from the real world, but if she had known the plot of the original, she wouldn't have been so obsessed with Aster, who is not particularly different from others. If you think about it this way, Karina all this time believed that Tasha was just the protagonist of the game, but she never tried to get to know her better. Karina's thoughts were interrupted by the emperor. The boy invited her to dance the first dance together. They formed a couple, becoming almost one. Aster asked what the girl was thinking about, and upon hearing the answer, asked her to focus on it. He was very jealous and only asked to enjoy their dance, after which the couple began to spin in each other's arms. Tasha watched them from the side, and the only thing she could do was nervously bite her fingers. This time, the guests again talked about the princess, but in this case, they talked about how beautiful her couple looked, like in a picture, and for the first time, the girl was glad that people were murmuring about her, so much so that she was ready to cry. Archduke Pioneer informed his daughter that he would be in his place that day and asked her to go see him. However, he wasn't there. Learning from the emperor that the owner of the magic tower, Karina's mother, was also present at the banquet, the girl got very scared and rushed to look for her before trouble occurred. In the hallway, she found her mother grabbing Tasha by the hair. She was loudly cursing the girl for taking away her daughter's fiancé. Andrew tried to intervene in the conflict, but also fell under the mage's wrath. The woman shouted that the guy was pathetic, since his wife was running around other men. Seeing Karina, the mother immediately changed her face. The angry squint was replaced by a cheerful smile, and the Archduchess's hair was let down. The girl took her hand and led her aside so as not to provoke a bigger conflict. Mom informed the princess that she would be staying at the palace with her father that night. The Archduke tried hard to escape, but he would still be forced to face the woman at home. The emperor joined the girls and greeted the owner of the magic tower. The woman immediately began to examine the boy all over. His face was not bad, and his physique was decent. Perhaps the emperor was even normal. He understood that her mother was worried about Karina, but he assured the woman that she had nothing to worry about, because he was a good guy and really liked the princess. The mage wished her daughter a good date and blew her a kiss. Karina was incredibly embarrassed because her mother was a special person. To Aster, the girl's mother turned out to be very interesting. He thought the princess resembled the Archduke, but she resembled him even more. Finally, the couple was left alone. Today, the emperor was only waiting for this moment. In the bathroom, Tasha sobbed as usual. Her husband was next to her, and Daniel was sitting on the opposite sofa. She was furious because her friend didn't help her when she asked the emperor to dance with her. Titi said that the boy didn't care and that the girl was not happy. The Archduke asked Daniel to leave, and he left without hesitation, but thinking that Tasha was acting as if she were crazy. When the couple was left alone, the girl asked him if Andrew was angry with her, but the boy didn't care at all that his wife didn't want to dance with him. At that moment, Titi noticed that something was wrong with the bracelet, because lately she had seen the affection level was very blurry. The Archduke asked his wife to remember two things. If she doesn't keep her promise, she will lose everything. And if she wants to live, she must be responsible for her words. Having finished his speech, Andrew quietly left the room. Tasha was glad that Karina thought the bracelet simply showed an affection window. If she had touched anything else, the girl would have been in trouble. However, even though the Archduchess returned the accessory to its previous state, she didn't do it. It doesn't work like before. Suddenly, Ray appeared in front of the girl and she fell into his arms. To the boy's question about whether anyone had offended her, Tasha answered negatively. But Raymond didn't believe it. The girl's eyes were red, like a rabbit's. In fact, something really bothered the Archduchess. She asked the boy to fulfill her request related to Karina. Finally, the emperor and the princess approached the doors of the winter garden. The inside was even more beautiful than the outside. It was cool in the garden, and Aster covered Karina's shoulders with his cloak. The empress was a winter mage, and her father built this garden for her so that even in cold weather she could enjoy beautiful flowers. Karina noticed that the emperor was a romantic, due to the fact that Aster was born as a summer mage, and his energy was different from his mother's. She was very weakened. Then a poisoning incident occurred. The poison shouldn't have affected her at all, but for a weakened body, it was a big blow. The woman gave birth to a son and died less than a year later. At every meeting, the father was angry with the child and said that his mother had died because of him. And what happened next, Karina already knew. Due to his father's neglect, Astaz's position as emperor became very weak. So to strengthen his power, he had to kill all his brothers and those who stood in his way. The girl was angry at the injustice of the situation. A 1-year-old child could not do such a thing, because the one who added the poison was the culprit. So the emperor shouldn't blame the child. Aster was very happy that the girl supported him. He took her hand and noticed it was very cold, to which the emperor replied that people with cold hands have warm hearts. It suddenly occurred to him that sincerity is wonderful, because the human race is capable of discerning it. The faces of the boy and the girl were opposite each other at an unusually close distance. It seemed like that very moment was about to happen right now, but someone very insistently started calling Karina. It seems Duke Malfurion was diligently looking for her, although the emperor was jealous of the girl. He still trusted her and let her be. Upon meeting Daniel, Karina asked why he was looking for her, given that he only ever needed to tea. The emperor decided this conversation was not for his ears, and moved away, giving his old friends the chance to talk privately. Daniel immediately blurted out that Tasha had somehow become strange. Of course, Karina was disappointed that the boy was looking for her only for this, and she replied that the girl had always been strange. But their relationship was also strange, since the Duke was running after a married girl, and he called her by her name. In words, he and Karina were friends, but the boy was always on Tasha's side. Now that Daniel thought about it, he apologized and admitted how narrow-minded he was. This time, the princess was pleasantly surprised and accepted her friend's apologies. Daniel felt as if the obsession had subsided. Since Karina and Tati had their fight, he felt like a crack had appeared in his heart. It seemed to him that Tasha was a fragile girl who needed to be protected with all his might. But after that day, she seemed so deceptive that just thinking about her made the boy feel sick. Karina clearly didn't expect to hear such words about Tasha from the boy, but she stated that the girl was not at all the same as he knew before. Recently, she yelled at him for not helping her convince the emperor to dance with her. Right, in front of the Archduke, her husband. Determined to find out something more, Karina asked Daniel if the seller of the bracelets they were given was a mage. He didn't remember exactly, so he suggested the girl ask her mother about it. After which Karina said goodbye to the boy, out of old friendship, advising him to reconsider his attitude towards Tasha in order to get rid of many problems. Upon learning from the butler that her mother was staying in her room and not in the hall, Karina went to meet her, thinking that perhaps her parents still had feelings for each other. After her breakup with Daniel, they divorced, not only because of feelings of coldness, but also because she chose magic and he chose family. They were so busy with their own affairs that they forgot about each other. And Karina's separation from Daniel was the last straw. The girl called her mother's room, and after waiting a few minutes, saw a breathless woman over gunpowder. The princess asked her to tell her something about the bracelet, and her mother asked where her daughter got it from. Karina was very scared and asked if there was dangerous magic in the decoration. But a quick look was not enough to understand, and the woman invited the princess into the room. Mrs. Payoneer served her daughter tea and asked her to wait a little. Karina hadn't been in her mother's room for a long time. Before it was always locked, but here nothing had changed. It was evident that her father was looking after her. Mom suggested that Daniel had given this girl the bracelet and squeezed it in her hand with all her might. Bracelets are an excellent base for a magical artifact, and the highest quality seasonal magic stones are mixed in them. If magic stones simply store magic, seasonal stones give away this magic. They are very difficult to obtain, and not much is known about them. The person who created this bracelet is either a genius or a madman. Mom put the decoration in a box so she could take it to the tower and study it carefully. Soon she asked her daughter how the emperor started dating, and without going into detail, the girl replied that it was a very long story and that it developed unexpectedly. The woman noticed that her daughter had always been a careful girl and instructed her to act as her heart dictated in any case. She could have fun sometime. Having started a conversation about men, my mother also could not avoid mentioning Wilhelm. Karina replied that she had sent a divorce request and everything should have been completed. But the boy behaved strangely somehow, and the request had not yet been answered. A noise drew the girl's attention. The mother confusedly said that it was a cockroach that she couldn't catch yet. On the table, Karina noticed blue antennae and waved her cup with all her might to kill the insect. It turned out that the father had been hiding at the table the whole time, and the blue whiskers were tufts of his hair. When his daughter screamed, the man almost burst out laughing. He hid well, but when he heard Wilhelm's name, he couldn't restrain himself. Karina still couldn't fully understand what the man was doing in her mother's room. Now there was nothing to worry about. The parents took charge of the confrontation between Karina and the fiancé and promised to sort everything out. Marquis Kanta tried to receive Karina's parents with all kindness, without giving the impression that something had gone wrong. The Pioneer family had sent the Hunts a divorce request a long time ago, and they couldn't wait for an answer. Wilhelm's father immediately declared that there had been a misunderstanding, and the son apologized to the princess. Wilhelm himself was summoned to the hall to hear his excuses. He greeted the guests and began to listen to the interrogation passionately. The father wanted to convince the pioneers that his son was sincerely apologizing to the fiancé. That day, the servants blocked his way, and the princess clearly wasn't in the mood to talk. So the boy lost his temper a little. But this is true love, acting without hesitation in the name of love itself, in the name of love for Tasha. For the desire to be with her, Wilhelm thought. He said he apologized, but the princess said she wanted a divorce. The boy admitted that he had made a mistake and repented. Regarding the words about the desire to become the Archduchess's lover, the boy said there was a misunderstanding, and he didn't say it. Madame Pioneer had the title of owner of the magic tower for a reason, so she took the initiative to ear to her property to find out the truth. Magic would help create memories of that day, and she would know whose words were true, and whose the words were not. Using teleportation, the woman moved everyone to her palace. Then Karina asked if William was ready to swear on his rank and honor as a knight. Kanta's parents were very worried, but they made sure their son wouldn't lie. The boy agreed, and Mrs. Pioneer began to immerse herself in the memory. The woman warned that it might make her head spin a little. Everyone present saw what happened on the day the boy had to apologize to the fiancé, and Wilhelm's deception failed miserably. The boy decided to stand firm until the end, and claimed that he did not remember this. Karina's mother was very angry because her magic couldn't lie under any circumstances. The butler defended the pioneer family he served, because everything the observers were seeing now, the servants had seen recently with their own eyes and heard with their own ears. Probably William, who swore by the title and honor of a knight, was not very happy to see himself from the outside. Now no one had any doubts about who was to blame for the divorce. Thanks to Bill's act, the girl got the Sabin Sea, and now she was just looking for a good perfumer. Mom sent Karina here, but in appearance this terrible place didn't look like a perfume boutique at all. On the threshold, the princess was greeted by a woman. She wasn't sure if the girl would find what she was looking for, but she was ready to show her the scents. Despite the small selection, the girl decided on a bottle and asked to hear this particular aroma. It was harsh at first, but after a couple of moments, Karina found herself in a field covered with morning dew. The grass swayed gently at her feet, and she was enveloped in a delicate floral aroma. After making sure that a woman named Nivea owned a perfume shop, the girl offered her a partnership. However, the woman's reaction was completely unpredictable. She shouted that she wasn't going to work with the girl because the Archduchess had also sent her. Karina was outraged by such a statement. She spoke about a rumor, known to many, that Tasha had taken 4 suitors from one girl, and the princess was the same girl. Therefore, it would be strange if she were Tasha's messenger. Nivea regretted making hasty conclusions and decided that the family of Freya could still be trusted. But Karina was very interested to know where the woman got that reaction from. Nivea said that one day the Archduchess approached her and offered cooperation. She said she wanted to create her own perfume brand and entrust all management to her partner. However, the woman found a slippery spot in the contract. There was a clause according to which all the recipes she created immediately became the property of the Archduchess. Nivea left her boutique to her daughter, who followed in her footsteps and also became a perfumer. But when she brought up the issue of ownership rights and succession in the management, Tasha suddenly got angry. The Archduchess was angry at the woman's disobedience and even threatened to destroy her. Shortly after, Nivea's customers disappeared, and people on the street no longer wanted to even talk to her, as if the woman had committed some kind of crime. Nivea was very tired. No matter how hard the perfumer tried, it was all in vain, so she was going to leave here. Karina was terribly familiar with this situation. She never crossed paths with Tasha, but there were many dirty rumors about the girl. And then Aster appeared in her life, like a savior. The boy unconditionally believed her words and was the first to offer help in taking revenge. It was Karina's turn to lend a hand. The princess decided to give the woman a chance and asked to be allowed to help her. Together, they could restore the business and make it prosper. Nivea doubted the princess's capabilities because Tasha was an archduchess and had some power. Karina decided to show the woman that in front of her was a person who was not afraid of Tasha. She said she was dating the emperor and that perhaps she herself would soon become empress. Then the girl's authority would be much greater than Tasha's authority. She did not rush Nivea to make a decision. She said that if the perfumer suddenly decides, let her go to the house of Duke Payoneer. When Tasha took everything from Karina, dropping her to the bottom, the girl dreamed that someone would tell her similar words. During the tea party, the girl and her mother discussed Tasha. After all, she had the audacity to make a face. Freya returned the bracelet to her daughter. Even in the magic tower, they couldn't figure out where it came from. The object was an ideal reservoir of magic. Mrs. Payoneer put her magic into the decoration and ordered the girl to do what she had always taught her. Thus Karina would always be safe. The woman said that Tasha would definitely try to harm her daughter, but she couldn't always protect her. So the girl should be careful, and Karina hugged her mother with all her love. A few days after her mother left, the princess was going to a picnic with the emperor. And her outfit was magnificent, so mature, elegant, but also terribly cute. Lily was tremendously happy that everything was getting better in Karina's life. She was always there as support and backing, living what the girl was going through. Knocking on the princess's door, the servant said that a man named Leia was looking for her, and that it was something urgent. Leia was Nivea's daughter. The girl said that a fire suddenly started in the store, and her mother ordered that the princess be informed about the incident. And she returned, but the fire still couldn't be put out. There was a book of aroma recipes there, and the woman went to look for it. The fire wasn't extinguished, and water didn't help. If the fire cannot be put out with water, then it is not normal, but probably magical. And then more help is needed. Karina sent Lily to the Mages Association to send capable people to the fire scene. And she, along with Lela, immediately prepared to go to the burning boutique. There was catastrophically little time, and the princess got on the horse, instructing the girl to catch up with her in the carriage. Karina promised that she would save Nivea and set off. She arrived at the fire scene and was horrified. The flames were still very strong, and people couldn't cope with them. As the girl suspected, the fire was magical, which means only another magic could extinguish it. Lily wouldn't have brought the mages here soon, but a little later, and Nivea wouldn't be alive. Karina took a bucket of water from the servant's hands and completely drenched her body with it. From head to toe, the girl stated that the fire was created by magic, so everyone should wait for the mages to arrive, while she, the daughter of the Archmage Freya, took care of rescuing the boutique owner. Once, Mom taught Karina magic. One of the lessons was how to create the form one could wish for. Freya believed that her daughter managed well without being a mage, and she did all this so that the princess could protect herself from the magical power directed against her. My mother's bracelet gave the girl strength and confidence. She just had to imagine the desired shape. Karina created a protective layer around herself in the form of water. Now she was no longer afraid of the flames. Having finished, she immediately ran to save Nivea. Amidst the fire, the women were sitting on the floor with a recipe book in hand. She injured her leg and couldn't walk, so she asked Karina to give the reference book to Leia and told her that her mother loved her very much. There was a lot of smoke in the room, and the woman lost consciousness. The princess couldn't leave it like that. She was going to leave here only with Nivea. Karina concentrated and created a stronger shield, a large dome filled with clean air. After breathing some oxygen, Nivea woke up and regained consciousness. Suddenly, out of nowhere, Raymond appeared. Most likely, he had been watching the tragic situation the whole time. Since Tayshia didn't possess magic, Karina decided that the man himself started the fire. But Raymond claimed he came to save the woman. The princess used the bracelet hoping it would somehow help, but the jewelry only allowed her to see the affection level. Raymond was not a hero, and in his whole life he did anything for free only for Tati. So he offered Karina a deal. She gives him the recipe book, and he, in turn, gets both of them out of the room. Karina was only angered by these words, and the girl replied that she didn't need his help. Raymond grabbed the princess's hand, letting her know that magic is not that simple, and that she won't be able to get out with her. Another ability of the selection window bracelet appeared in front of the girl. Confused, she didn't select any option, and the answer was selected automatically. Karina remained silent, and the boy's affection level increased slightly. He still stood firm and waited for the princess to hand over the book. The girl said there was no other option, and Raymond decided that she had finally come to her senses, and she would cooperate with him. However, Karina simply sent her ex-fiancé away. On the verge of fainting, the girl still resisted. She simply couldn't do anything else. Since the princess didn't give the book to the boy, he decided to take it himself. Suddenly, someone appeared behind Raymond, and feeling the appearance of a stranger. The boy tensed up a little. He had just turned to look at the stranger when he knocked him out. Karina managed to open her eyes a little to see what was happening. It seemed the emperor had come to her aid. The princess woke up in her bed. Her throat was incredibly dry, and she asked Lily to give her a glass of water. It turned out that at that moment, the parents were in the girls' room. They were very worried, so much so that Freya started showing her daughter her fingers so she could name her number. They were truly frightened and very happy that Karina regained consciousness. The family gathered in hugs. Mrs. Pioneer told her daughter that she had acted recklessly and ended up sleeping for 5 days. But Nivea told her everything, and the woman thanked Karina for saving her friend. The girl asked in what state Nivea was now. The woman everything was fine. She was in the hospital and woke up even before Karina. The princess said that she and the perfumer saw Raymond at the fire scene, and perhaps what happened was his doing. But Freya was quick to convince her daughter. The guy was registered at the magic tower, and if he had started a fire, everyone would have known immediately. The person who did this was very prudent. He blocked the magic, and it was impossible to restore the memories. Her father also investigated. Fortunately, Nivea had insurance, so restoring the building shouldn't have been a problem, so that Karina could concentrate on her recovery. On the table lay a pile of letters written by the emperor while the girl was asleep. Astor said he would send letters every day until his beloved answered him. A couple of days have passed since then. Karina has almost recovered, and she and the emperor exchanged letters every day, even though the guy was very busy calculating the defense budget. The girl was reading another letter when a servant entered her room with the news that Mrs. Nivea had come to visit the palace. The woman thanked Karina for saving her life, but still decided to refuse the offer of cooperation. That day she inhaled too much smoke and stopped smelling fragrances. At the hospital, they said there was very little chance of recovery, and the woman could no longer consider herself a perfumer. Karina believed that Nivea had experienced too much to give up so easily. Despite the difficulties, for the sake of the recipe book, she risked her own life, and her many years of experience also did not disappear. The girl asked the perfumer to fight until the end. The woman was glad that the princess cared so much for her and agreed to follow the girl. But with one condition. Nivea wanted Leia to be the main perfumer. Despite her youth, she not only had talent but was a genius. Karina agreed and moved on to discussing the details. This summer, her family was organizing a masquerade ball, which has been held annually since the time of the first duke. Even before the ball begins, it becomes the most interesting topic of discussion. So this was the perfect opportunity to showcase their product, especially considering that aristocrats are extremely sensitive to personal care. The only drawback was that there was only 1 week left until the masquerade ball, and the schedule would be tight, but Nivea was not afraid at all. Karina asked Lily to prepare the carriage for departure, even though she had not fully recovered yet. To catch a tiger, you must enter its lair, and the girl was going to do just that. Declare war on the tiger. On the way, the princess thought about how unfair this world was. It existed only for Tasha and revolved exclusively around her. That's what the girl thought until now, and yet, recently she almost died. She and Nivea were not just puppets existing only for Tasha's sake. In the palace of Archduke Gloucester, Karina was drinking tea waiting for the Archduchess to appear. Tasha did not expect her friend to appear, of course. She heard the terrible news and said she was worried about the girl. Karina told her that the shop owner had lost her sense of smell, and that worried her a lot. Titi didn't understand why the princess was telling her this. Despite the Archduchess's excuses, the girl perfectly understood who was to blame for the fire. So she came to the palace to remind her ex-girlfriend that she had ruined someone's life. Karina was about to leave when Tasha shouted that she had nothing to do with it. The girl stated that it was all the princess's fault because she was trying to take away what Titi couldn't. Angrily, the Archduchess pushed her friend on the shoulder and accused Karina of being jealous of her, and therefore interfering in everything the girl wants to take over. Tasha said that everything that shines in the princess's hands is worthless trash that did not surrender to her. The Archduchess started talking about how Aster was like everyone else, and Karina slapped her with all her might. Tasha was surprised, but getting even angrier, she attacked the princess. However, the girl easily grabbed her hand. Karina's earrings were artifacts, and she recorded every word her rival said on them. Titi said this was very bad, but in this situation, it certainly wasn't for her to talk about meanness. The princess made it clear to the girl that the world would no longer be so kind to her, and she hurried away. Karina left with the servants and told them why the girls fought, dishonoring Tasha. Titi was about to fight with the princess, but remembering the recorded conversation, she kept silent. The princess was determined to make her ex-friend pay for a long time for her ruined life, and for Nivea's life. On the street, the girl was stopped by the Archduke. He probably wanted to chat with her about something, but Karina wasn't in the mood to talk to her ex-fiancé. Andrew grabbed her hand, and the girl immediately asked him to leave her alone. The Gloucester couple valued each other. They continued to flirt even after the wedding. The Archduke asked Karina to spare him a couple of minutes, but the girl advised him to send an official request to the Duke's estate, and hurried away. Previously, just looking at him made her cry, but time really heals. The maid offered tea to the Archduchess, but Tasha asked to be left alone. Hearing the whispers, the girl went to the door to understand what they were talking about, and realized that the servants were discussing rumors about her. Tasha had a bad habit. Every time the Archduchess was nervous, she bit her nails and the skin around them. When the girl was 19, everything was completely different. Even then, with the help of a bracelet, she increased the affection of the boys around her. Everyone admired Titi's thoughtfulness and kindness, and Lady Karina was considered an ice queen. In the academy courtyard, Tasha saw a friend with a boy and called her over to say hello. On the weekend, she and Daniel were going to a cafe, and the future Archduchess invited the girl to spend time with them. Karina refused, citing a meeting with her fiancé. As soon as she left, the students immediately started discussing that the girl was dating a boy worse than her, so that he definitely wouldn't leave her. Tasha, as always in her usual manner, pretended to be worried about her friend. In the garden, Andrew was enthusiastically reading a book when someone touched his cheek with a finger. The boy thought Karina had approached him, but when he saw his friend in front of him, he was greatly surprised. The girl asked to see his book, and having guessed the choice, offered to be Andrew's friend. Finally, Karina could relax and enjoy the spa treatments. Lily herself mixed the cream and gave a wonderful massage. The princess felt like she was in heaven and believed that the girl should open a massage business. Finally, the princess was reunited. Thanks to Lily, she looked and felt great. His Majesty was already waiting for the girl in the residence courtyard. Karina asked if Aster was tired and if she was tiring him, and the emperor replied that he loved his work very much. The couple was very happy to meet and decided to go for a walk. The emperor asked the girl when she learned magic, and Karina blushed, answering that her powers were not so strong and that if it weren't for him, she and Nivea might already be dead. The boy claimed that he only arrived when everything was over. Perhaps the girl mistook someone else for Aster. She understood she was wrong, but those eyes were exactly the same as the emperor's. In any case, the boy considered Karina incredible even without magic. She barely learned and already saved a person. Without hesitation, she plunged into a furious flame. The girl doubted whether she had acted unreasonably and could have harmed other people, but Aster promised that he would always be on her side, in love and in politics. and he asked her not to doubt herself. Archduke Andrew was heading to a meeting with the emperor, not understanding why he summoned him. Because no incident had occurred, he asked the guest to come in and sit down. It turned out he didn't intend to scold him. The man decided to get straight to the point and said that he should thank the Archduke. He found out that a couple of weeks ago Andrew was on Betty's street. There was a problem in the boy's boutique, and his personal presence was required. The emperor continued that a fire broke out in one of the boutiques that day. Andrew was worried because he was sure that no one had seen him at that moment. The man said that Karina thought he had saved her, but the emperor wasn't there. The Archduke admitted that he passed by and managed to help. The emperor's face changed, but he said everything was in order and that Andrew was worthy of the reward, and he handed him the precious seasonal stones. The boys said goodbye, and the Archduke headed for the exit. He felt like a wild animal was staring at his back. However, the emperor decided to ask the boy one more question. He already knew that Gloucester's wife really didn't like Karina, and he suspected if it was their doing. Astor pressed Gloucester with magic and began to justify that, most likely. Raymond, who appeared in the capital, was to blame for what happened. But this only made things worse. Now, knowing that Andrew went with Raymond, the emperor didn't understand how he dared to say that he accidentally saved Karina. Andrew always pretended not to know anything, and he always wanted to take away what belonged to Astor. Even as a child, his father loved the Duke more than Astor. The man was ready to give everything to the boy, even if Astor already had it. He was looking for much better things for the youngest. Astor had to make sure that everything would be fine and that he would still become emperor. A few years later, the previous emperor died, and a fierce struggle for the imperial throne began. Having killed the second prince, the main culprit of the riots, Astor immediately went to Andrew. The guy escaped, and thanks to this he remained alive. If someone were to invade the emperor's throne, the first person Astor would think of would be his half-brother. This time he was very lucky again. Due to his reputation, the emperor could not get rid of the duke, so he pretended to believe his words. Upon leaving Astor's office, the boy removed his nervous smile and panicked. Upon returning to his residence, Gloucester nervously asked the maid where his wife was. Of course, the woman saw that something was wrong with the couple. The couple behaved as if they were about to kill each other, and on the first night, there was even a flash of a dagger. Finally, upon finding Taycia, the Duke demanded the girl hand over the bracelet. He wondered where the magic he put in on the first night had gone. Tensing up, the girl said she didn't know if there was magic in the bracelet or not. Andrew understood that his wife was deceiving him and angrily pushed her aside. The boy shouted that the girl had no conscience left and that she had ruined his life. Taycia didn't understand what she had done wrong, but she apologized to her husband, shedding tears. The Duke knew that Raymond secretly used his magic and started the fire. He reminded the girl not to forget that their marriage is based solely on her promise to make him emperor, so she should stop fooling around. At night, the girl went to someone's house, located deep in the forest. Ray met her on the threshold. The guy was covered in bruises and scratches, but for Tati, he was ready to endure anything. He assumed the girl wanted to ask him for something. Otherwise, why would she come in such darkness? Taycia always twirled a lock of hair around her finger when she wanted to ask Raymond something difficult. This time, Ray suffered because of the girl, so he was embarrassed to ask her for anything. But as soon as the boy said he was ready to do anything for her, Tati asked to kill Karina. In the commercial area of Master's Calla Street, the princess and Lily were already running towards the perfumers. Mother and daughter were happy to have guests. They apologized for the mess and asked the girls to come in. Things were going well, but Nivea and Leia hadn't slept for 3 days and dedicated time to research. Being a maid who loves cleanliness, Lily immediately started cleaning everything around her, while the princess asked the girls to show her the new aromas. Finally, everyone sat at the round table, and Leia began her presentation. The new fragrance was created for the strong girls of this world. The spicy top notes create a strong impression. The middle notes are soft and glamorous, and the base notes are subtle and long-lasting. The perfumer did a much better job than the princess expected, and now it was time to ask questions. The girl was interested to know if a product very different from the others would arouse the interest of noble ladies. And Leia replied that the aroma has good longevity, bright and sharp top notes, and it is also familiar to the girls, but with its own charm. Just like the princess, Lily believed that the perfumer was an unconditional genius. She not only created good aromas, but also knew well the seasons of perfume. Of course, Karina was surprised when she learned that Leia wanted to name the fragrance after her, believing that she was not worthy of being the muse for such a fragrance. The perfumer made it clear to the girl that she knows how to wait for the right moment and acts without hesitation when necessary. She is brave and always willing to help. That's why the fragrance conveys the image of the lady who fought the flames that day, saving Nivea's life. The sun had already begun to set below the horizon, and the perfumers said goodbye to the girls, wishing them a good journey. Karina was glad that she could help Nivea and Leia without allowing Tasha to ruin such talent. In the past, she wouldn't have even thought of involving someone in her revenge. But teamwork was surprisingly effective. For the first time, Karina, just like Lily, eagerly awaited the ball. In the palace, the emperor received good news. His rating among the residents increased by 20% compared to last year. The reason for this was the policy of friendship towards the people, as well as friendly relations with the Pioneer family. Upon learning that Princess Pioneer had arrived at the palace, the emperor completed his report and dismissed the advisors. When they met, he apologized because every time he invited her to boring workplaces. But the girl liked it, on the contrary, which is why she felt closer to Esther. Today, Karina came to invite the boy to a family ball. She didn't want him to feel obliged, so she was ready to accept a refusal if the emperor was still busy. Despite the large amount of work, Esther promised to make time and come. Still, it was about their relationship, and he couldn't refuse his beloved. Karina's dress for the ball looked great, but the girl doubted whether it was perhaps too revealing. The parents were stunned when they saw their daughter, as is typical among parents. They were worried that the outfit was too provocative, and besides, Karina said she didn't like this kind of clothing. On the girl's 10th birthday, Tasha dressed more beautifully than the birthday girl herself, and Karina was very annoyed that day. At that time, she lived quietly so as not to influence the original, but that was enough. Today the girl was going to shine. The ball began. Everyone was having a great time, enjoying the atmosphere and communication. Suddenly, the lights went out, and the guests were very scared. Under the spotlights, Princess Karina appeared to greet all the guests at her family ball. Before the celebration began in full swing, the girl decided to give everyone present something never seen before, and presented the prepared aroma. The Pioneer parents proudly watched their daughter from the side, roasting the girl. The ladies were delighted with the performance. Paper butterflies fluttered around the hall, saturated with an incredible aroma that would now be hard to forget. Karina was glad that the guest reaction was good and that the ball was a success. In her youth, the princess thought that suitors were being taken away from her because of her role, but it turned out that the girl had gotten herself into this structure. For the first time in a long time, after greeting Mrs. Butterfly, Daniel looked at her so sweetly and congratulated her. The girl wished her friend a good evening and moved on, but the boy shouted after her. Daniel invited Karina to dance with him, and given the recent events, the girl was going to refuse. Just a couple of meters from them, a glass of champagne broke. The owner of the glass was Tasha. With a look of pity, she asked how a friend could betray her. 4 hours before the ball, Titi was very nervous. She didn't look like a girl and wanted to get rid of Karina as quickly as possible. The maid who brought the girl tea found the Archduchess with her finger bitten to the point of bleeding, and was horrified. Bandaging Tasha's finger, she expressed doubts about whether the girl should go to the ball, since she wasn't feeling very well. But for the Archduchess, the letter was not just an invitation, but a warning that Karina was going to take her place. Titi learned from the woman that her husband was not ready yet. She would have to leave first. The maid encouraged the girl that soon everything would work out for her. Tasha agreed because no matter what they said, she considered herself special. When the Archduchess arrived at the ball, all eyes turned to her again. The girl lived, delighting in the admiration, praise, and envy of other people towards her. All this was a balm for her soul. However, that night secular society not only talked about her, but Karina's scent also attracted people's attention. Lela, whom Tasha recognized as Nevia, told the girl about the aroma and asked her to inhale it to hear it. Titi felt uncomfortable. She had a feeling that something was wrong. While having fun at the buffet table, out of the corner of her eye, the girl noticed her devoted admirer Daniel. Not only did his affection drop to 50%, but he also secretly came here from the girl. Tasha decided to regain the boy's affection, and following him, she saw an unpleasant sight for her. The girl burst into tears, and Daniel's affection level began to rise. Everything was going according to plan. Karina intervened in what was happening. She even found it funny that, being married to the Archduke, Tati was flirting with a friend. The girl left her friends to have fun together and prepared to leave in the opposite direction. This time, Daniel couldn't let it go and ran after the princess, asking them to talk together. The girl didn't understand why this was necessary. Last time she said she didn't consider Tasha and Daniel her friends. It seems they have completely lost consciousness or reason, since they forgot Karina's nickname. That appeared at the academy because of them. In her 17th autumn, when Tati started dating Daniel, the girl definitely thought she was the main character, and she chose Daniel as her main character. And that's why I thought the reign of the original had also ended. Due to the influence of the original, no matter what Tasha did, those around her perceived her positively. And if Karina was angry at the girl, she was treated like a villain. One day, Tati and the boys gathered without Karina. Tati told them how Daniel admitted that he liked her more than Karina when he was a child. The boys believed that the girl was simply interfering with the couple because Tati was so sweet and beautiful that Karina felt inferior because of it, envying her friend. That day, Karina heard everything the boys were talking about, including the fact that they nicknamed her the envious princess. The girl couldn't understand why they did this to her. Tasha was the main character, and she was only a supporting character, and yet, Karina considered her a friend. During lunch in the cafeteria, she heard the condemnation of her classmates. Every word was a dagger in the girl's heart. However superfluous she was, Karina was not going to tolerate such an attitude, so she asked Tasha and Daniel to stop the rumors. Tati sympathized with her friend's misfortune and said that she was not to blame for these rumors. The girl was very confused about Daniel. As a friend, he gave her the advice that rumors do not appear for no reason, so the princess should think about it. Seeing these two, who completely contradicted each other, Karina finally understood. No matter what family she is from, how she looks, what skills she has, because Tasha is the main protagonist, and the girl is just a supporting character who can be insulted. Karina called Daniel a coward. He didn't want to turn bad, and at the decisive moment, he fell completely silent. So, if he wanted to continue calling her falsely his friend, he should have thought about what he was really like. Tasha played the victim, sobbing and accusing the girl of being cold. All attention turned back to the Archduchess. The guests discussed that the pioneer princess had made a mistake, and looking at the crying girl, their hearts bled. The emperor appeared at the celebration. He thought that 2 against 1 was unfair, and invited the princess to stand on his side. This was no longer necessary, because the Archduke appeared next to Tati and asked his wife to stop causing scandals and apologize. The girl shouted that she didn't want to do this and ran down the stairs. Seeing how well the interaction between the emperor and the princess was going, Andrew was a little annoyed. And he left too. Astor apologized to Karina for being late and whispered something in her ear. The boy laughed. It was a masquerade ball, and the girl had to keep her identity secret, although everyone already knew who was in front of them. After joking a little more, Astor invited the princess to have fun together, and she happily accepted his invitation. The boy didn't like sweets, but he still ate them at the celebration. The more Karina got to know him, the kinder he seemed to her. Astor didn't understand why everyone loved masquerades so much, but after participating, he began to get involved in them. With his face covered, he was calmer in his soul, and by getting to know each other, they could pretend not to. Know each other, feel freedom without revealing your identity. The boy asked Karina if she felt free. For a long time, he had noticed that the girl was constantly thinking and worrying about something. The princess was betrayed very often and stopped believing in herself, apparently. That's why Karina worried about everything. She was already drunk and asked to talk about something fun. Since the princess had invited the emperor to such a grand celebration, he decided to reciprocate and invited her to a hunting festival at the palace. The girl was worried that the event was very important and she probably shouldn't attend, but Astor felt her burden and said that if she accepted the house he caught, it would be enough. He asked the princess to stop apologizing because he told her that he would always be on her side, so that she could be selfish and use him. Whether due to alcohol or not, Karina's heart beat so fast as if it was about to jump out. Tati could no longer find a place at the ball and stood against the wall with her head bowed. Andrew approached the girl to return home together, but she refused out of fear. Her husband had a soft voice and a warm palm, but the same cold gaze. The man did not try to persuade his wife and headed for the exit alone. The girl felt bad. Tasha once again heard rumors about her life with her husband and begged someone to help her. Tati's bracelet shone in a special way, as if it gave hope to its owner. Lifting her head in front of her, the girl saw Daniel, and a friend offered to accompany her. On the street, they approached the carriage. The guy said that was his transport, and that Tati could get in to go home. He also added that he was her friend, so Tati could always turn to him. She decided that the boy was still kind to her. Tati approached Daniel to hug him from behind, but he pushed his friend away. The boy admitted that Karina was right, and from now on he would stay away from the girl. On the way home, Tasha nervously bit her bandaged fingers. First Andrew, and now Daniel looked at her like this. The girl thought that Karina had done something. Otherwise, this couldn't have happened. She had to get rid of her rival as soon as possible. A desperate guy blocked the carriage's path, practically throwing himself under it. With a sharp movement, the coachman had to stop the transport so as not to harm the madman. The guy headed for the carriage, and the man tried to stop him, but nothing happened. Wilhelm opened the door and, looking inside to make sure the Archduchess was inside, he got into the carriage. He really scared the girl. First the carriage shook, immobilizing Tati, and now a guy was assaulting her. Wilhelm's affection level approached 100. With tears in his eyes, he begged his beloved to answer why he was avoiding her. Tasha pressed her cheek with the palm of her hand and replied that she was avoiding the boy for his own good. She said that people suspected they had a romantic relationship, but Wilhelm didn't care. He thought it was normal to be lovers in his time, and he didn't care about other people's opinions, because he had already given up everything for her. All documents and inheritance went to Karina. They kicked him out of the guard, and practically also out of the house. The knight abandoned everything to be close to the girl. Desperate, he threw himself into the arms of his beloved, and Tati promised him that she would not abandon him. The Archduke didn't understand how Tasha could ask him to accept her lover as a guard. Of course, the girl didn't consider him a lover, but only a friend. But other people hardly thought so. If Andrew accepted Wilhelm into his guard, then he would be considered an imbecile who gave up his place to his wife's lover. Tasha understood that her husband needed strength, so she said that Wilhelm was one of the most outstanding swordsmen in the empire, and that if Andrew had enough strength, he could resist the emperor. After thinking for a while, the Archduke agreed with Tati. The boy was ready to accept a lover to return what belonged to him. Upon leaving her husband's office, the girl first leaned against the wall and then fell to the floor. After the incident with the bracelet, the dizziness worsened due to excitement. However, there was no time. Tati needed to concentrate. Otherwise, she would have lost to Karina. The masquerade ball was coming to an end. The enthusiastic guests thanked the princess for the celebration and wondered when the perfume would go on sale. Judging by the good response to the product, the girl could play big. Perhaps it was even worth improving the packaging and releasing a collector's edition. Lily, as the princess's most devoted fan, was very proud of the girl that night for how she wiped the noses of her attackers. And she was glad that at the right moment, an emperor appeared in Karina's life. The girls wished each other good night, and Karina noticed a bright light emanating from the box where she kept her bracelet. The princess opened it, and bright rays illuminated the entire room. A game notification appeared in front of the girl. One of the endings was unlocked because Karina took Wilhelm's Sabency and started a perfume business. The new notification stated that achieving accomplishments weakens the restriction characteristic, and the girl felt that the space around her was becoming freer. Of course, Karina guessed, but seeing the word restriction with her own eyes was strange. So, the reason why the princess felt the strange increase in Tasha's influence before was that the girl had passed Andrew's ending, and the original restriction had weakened. In any case, Karina was now sure that seeing the ending weakened that impact. If she saw it, she could see the foundation of the Daniel Malfurion Honorary Hospital right now. He finds and sponsors only those doctors who are researching new surgical methods. All Karina had to do was open a hospital in this place. Reaching the end with Raymond will be the most difficult. He is very hostile towards the princess, and in the ending she knew, he renounces his status as owner of the Magic Tower and swears allegiance to Tasha. Raymond would never be loyal to Karina, and it would be difficult with him. So the girl decided to think about it later. First, she had to attack Daniel, an important conversation, for which a personal meeting with Daniel was necessary. It was about the western lands of his territory. Although it was already too late, the princess was going to accept them as compensation for breaking the engagement. And Tasha was mentioned again in the story. The boy recently sold these lands to her. Karina was surprised by her friend's foolishness. He sold his land without even asking why. Titi also went to Nivea before her, and this time she bought the lands. The girl behaved as if she knew the original endings. And this was not just a coincidence. Then, the princess asked Daniel to introduce her to his close friend, who specialized in magic and medicine. Even if he was in the wrong place, then with the same people he would open a hospital. Maybe there would be a chance to influence the ending. Daniel hesitated again. Karina wouldn't be surprised at all if Tasha had already taken his friend Robert. In fact, after the boy was kicked out of the family, she and Daniel stopped communicating. In this case, the girl asked her friend to find out where Robert was now. Daniel promised that he would fulfill her request, and once again began to apologize for the incidents at the academy. If he really meant it, Karina asked the boy to stop hiding behind hypocrisy. This was the only way to get his forgiveness. The girl sat at the table in her room and thought. She thought everything would be simple, but nothing went her way. She hadn't received any land or found a doctor yet. Just in case, she decided to test the ending with Raymond. The problem was that Karina didn't know to what extent the ending should match the original. The keyword in Raymond's ending was loyalty to Tasha. It is possible that any of his actions demonstrating loyalty to Karina counted as a final condition. It was worth experimenting, but Raymond would not swear loyalty to the girl. Suddenly, an idea struck her. A couple of days later, one of the knights of the Pioneer estate informed the princess in the middle of the night that Raymond had invaded her home. The guards grabbed him and locked him in the food storage, so the girl hurried to meet the uninvited guest. Everything turned out better than she thought. In the storage room, the guy was tied to a chair with ropes, and his mouth was covered with a cloth. Raymond couldn't utter a word, and Karina was even glad. Finally, the boy stopped being noisy. He couldn't use his great magic, and he could feel like an ordinary person. The girl took the gag off her ex-fiancé and notified him that he had dirt on Tasha, and that therefore, if he truly loved her, he had to offer Karina a deal. Raymond was not going to make a deal with someone like her, and the princess believed that someone like him should crawl at her feet. The difference between them was that Karina was self-critical, and the boy was not. Even his own family abandoned Carcel, and he still didn't become the owner of the magic tower. Moreover, due to his terrible temper, he had many enemies, but he did not lack arrogance. Karina grabbed the boy by the neck and told him that from the moment he sent the letter, she foresaw that he would sneak into her house because she saw through people like him. Raymond tried to prove to the princess that she was no better than him, but the girl just laughed. She was no longer the same Karina from the academy, incapable of being mean. Unlike the moment the fire occurred, now she had indisputable evidence that the mage had invaded her house. Raymond would have been immediately expelled from the candidates for the place of the tower owner, and then Karina would distribute the recording of Tasha in the royal palace, setting a fire and insulting the emperor. If you are lucky, forced labor, if not get out. Raymond asked what the girl wanted, and she joked that she needed his body, which caused a strong reaction from the boy. Karina got down to business and proposed her conditions. Soon the royal household would begin, in which Raymond would have to present the whole game to her, which meant devotion and love. Of course, the boy was not enthusiastic about such an idea, but the choice was still small. Either not to see the place of the tower owner, or to swallow his pride just once. The princess called the guards to release Ray, and by that time she had time to think. Since Karina could not trust Raymond's word, she presented him with a contract. All he had to do was sign it. The content of the document aroused the boy's indignation, because it said that, during the royal household, Raymond must present the house to Karina, and until that time, he must unconditionally obey the girl. In case of breach of contract, he loses all his magical powers, and loses his place as owner of the magic tower. In the end, Carcel had to agree and signed it. The girl bewitched the contract, and that's why a mark appeared on the boy's neck. His magical power had not returned yet, and Raymond was angry because he couldn't use magic. He began to give orders again, which angered Karina, and the girl kicked the boy out the door. Raymond promised that he would curse her for the rest of his future life if he suddenly died at the hands of some street assassins. At that moment, an unknown person was watching the mage from the bushes. Standing on the street, Carcel had already regretted not listening to Titi's request. The boy refused the girl's call to kill Karina, and she became hysterical. The Archduchess shouted that Ray was a liar because he promised to do everything for her. In fact, the mage was not eager to end up in prison, and besides, he didn't hate the princess enough to kill her. Titi accused the boy that he was just like all men and was about to leave. Raymond asked the Archduchess not to leave and took a ring out of the box. It was made of wood stone with magic capable of controlling consciousness. If the girl had used it correctly, then her complicated relationship with Karina might have ceased to be a problem. Moreover, the ring left no magical trace, so Titi didn't have to worry. She immediately changed her face and threw herself into Raymond's arms. Karina, taking pity on the boy, still opened the door. Judging by his guilty look, he stood up and insulted her the whole time. The princess asked if Ray's powers had returned, and he proudly demonstrated his abilities. As a token of kindness to her slave, the girl placed a guard on him. While watching what was happening, the unknown person in the tree regretted missing such a great opportunity. On the street, Duke Daniel clung to Karina and explained that the area was very dangerous, and that the boy himself wanted to see Robert. Near the doctor's house, creditors were making noise, and those who clearly disagreed with the law. Daniel volunteered to deal with the boys. The princess had no idea that a boy could be so brave. Confused, he started muttering something, and the fat man pressed the boy against the wall, hinting that he should respect his turn. Malfurion apologized to the girl because it didn't work out for him. Daniel is who he is. Karina called the boys to pay attention to her and whistled as loudly as she could. The knight landed right in front of the girl, preparing to protect the lady. According to the laws of the empire, unregistered persons were prohibited from granting loans or credit to other citizens. As a representative of the Capitol Guard, the guy had every right to detain them. Daniel didn't understand what had just happened, and the girl explained to him. His Majesty assigned her guards. Entering the house, the young people greeted Robert, who was not yet in sight. Karina found a man under the table, begged him to forgive them, and then she would definitely pay the debt. Convinced that there were familiar faces in front of him, Robert finally got up from the floor and greeted the guests. The princess introduced herself and asked the man to give her some time. Robert recognized the girl. She was the same one Daniel broke off his engagement with, and the man was happy that they were back together. Karina made Robert understand that he was mistaken, and in fact, she came to him to offer him the position of chief doctor at the hospital. The man said that they had wrong directions, because someone like him had no right to be a doctor. Although the girl did not know the whole situation or the exact reasons, she knew that 3 years ago his research was suspended. Karina asked the doctor to become a doctor in her hospital and continue his research. Robert thanked him for the honor, but suggested more worthy candidates than him, Eric Foreman and Allison Cameron, doctors with whom he conducted his research. He couldn't say anything more and asked the young people to leave. Of course, Karina no longer remembered everything exactly, but she was sure that at the end of the game there were 3 doctors. Daniel told her that the 3 of them studied and worked in Dr. Gregory's laboratory. But as far as the boy knew, after the death of the doctor from an incurable disease, they parted ways. Foreman does not come from a wealthy family, and after the laboratory closed, he dropped out of his studies due to financial problems, and Allison works as Tasha's attending physician. In fact, it's not that Daniel was hiding it from Karina, it's just that she never asked. And besides, she was always in a bad mood when it came to Tasha. The boy always talked about accidents when it came to the relationship between the princess and the Archduchess, and the girl asked him if he really broke up with her and went to Tasha, also by mistake. To absolutely everyone, Daniel wanted to be a good person, but in the end, in Karina's eyes, he simply became a hypocrite. In any case, the girl did not expect help from her friend, but the ending for Raymond couldn't be the same as in the game, so I would like everything to end for Daniel exactly as in the original. This means that it was necessary to gather those 3 and appoint Robert as chief doctor. But first, it was necessary to find out what cat had run between them. Daniel stopped Karina. He could help the girl in some way because he knew where Eric Foreman was. It so happened that Mr. Foreman worked in the general laboratory. Tasha placed him here at the request of Mrs. Ellison. And again, Tasha Karina suggested that, as in Nivea's case, the Archduchess was facing a dispute between a trio of doctors. The young people met Eric, and Karina introduced herself to the boy. She asked why the doctor didn't continue his studies, to which he replied that, due to his social status, the issue of money had always been important to him. Because Foreman had studied long before, he could somehow earn money now. At the end of the month, The girl said that Robert recommended a colleague to her, but it turned out that the friends no longer communicated. In any case, Karina planned to open a hospital, so she invited the man to join her team to continue his research. 4-day work week, flexible schedule, paid vacation. She promised him better conditions than his current employer. Of course, there was no need to make a decision right now, so if Foreman had any questions, he could send a letter to the Pioneer family estate. Finally, the doctor asked Karina to tell Robert something if they crossed paths again. Tell him that they had no other choice then. After a while, the butler brought the girl a letter, which, however, was sent by a doctor. Along with the letter, the man also provided documents with information from the association, thanks to which what happened between the trio could be clarified. As Karina thought, this happened in the same month 3 years ago. After the death of Professor Allison, she became Tasha's attending physician. At the same time as the girl contacted Nivea. Well, if the princess was planning a meeting with Allison, there was only 1 day for it. At that moment, Lily, out of breath, ran into the room, rushing to report something. The girl shouted that something terrible had happened. Due to difficulty breathing, she couldn't say anything coherent, so the butler went to get her a glass of water. Finally, having regained her senses, Lily said that a new perfume boutique had appeared right opposite the store they were preparing to open. Moreover, the boutique belonged to the family of the Marquis of Hunt, and not to the ducal family of Gloucester. Probably Tasha didn't want to act openly, so she used the Marquis for this venture. There were rumors that Lord William had been appointed master of the Silver Dragon Knight Order, which belonged to the ducal family of Gloucester. Of course, Lily was outraged that a person like him became the master of the order. Something told Karina that Tasha sent Wilhelm, who simply had nowhere else to go, to the order, and as a price he asked to open a boutique. Lily also perfectly understood that this was not a coincidence, and was even more indignant. After all, this was to be expected. And besides, the appearance of a competitor in a nearby area is a common thing in business. Karina did not despair at all, believing that any crisis is a new opportunity to make her own boutique the best. After such news, the princess gathered the girls so that they could all regain some sense and decide what to do next. Now that a new fragrance was introduced at the masquerade ball last week, they face a new problem. That is, the appearance of a competitor right opposite them. Given that this Ville perfume boutique was literally a couple of days before the opening of their store, they had to destroy and trample their competitor, who knows nothing about business ethics. The flame of anger ignited, and the girls agreed with Karina without objection. Today there was only one topic on the agenda. They postponed the opening of the boutique. After such a statement, Lily, Nivea, and Lella were left gaping in surprise. It would seem that with the arrival of a competitor, they should, on the contrary, speed up the opening. Moreover, thanks to the masquerade ball, their perfume was on everyone's lips. Karina handed the girls a document with their names. These were customers who immediately decided to make a purchase as soon as they heard the perfume's aroma at the ball. To begin with, they would sell the perfume in a batch to the 100 high-ranking people on this list. As the girls were able to understand after attending the ball, in such a small community as the aristocracy, any information spreads very quickly. Rumors about their perfume will spread like a virus, and when everyone is talking about it, and people's interest is at its peak, they will open a boutique right after the royal household ends. This will be the best perfume boutique of Nevia and Leia in the empire. Therefore, now they were not going to tremble with fear and open a store in a hurry. On the contrary, they were going to wait to gain strength and let their brand grow. Regarding this, there were 2 points in Karina's plan. On the first floor, there would be perfume lines for the average mass-market customer, and on the second and third floors, there would be premium lines. Nivea decided to present a proposal that she had been postponing for a long time due to financial problems. It was about creating base cosmetics using their perfume aromas. For example, some bath products or body creams would combine well with their base aromas. Thus, even those who don't really like to wear perfumes will be able to enjoy these wonderful aromas. Moreover, along with these cosmetics, the aroma of the perfume will be revealed more deeply. In addition, by combining cosmetics and perfumes, everyone can create a unique aroma different from anything else. However, there was a big problem. For the cosmetics to retain their aroma for a long time, it was necessary to resort to alchemy. They said that 3 years ago, the Carcel family received a patent for work in this area, so their help was needed to implement this idea. By a surprising coincidence, 3 years ago, after the departure of the Archduchess and the cessation of funding, all alchemists, including members of the Karsel clan, broke ties with Nivea. The woman was still angry remembering that incident. Karina asked not to worry about it and promised her that she would find her an alchemist. Then, Nivea proposed the candidacy of Raymond Karsel, and the princess didn't quite understand what she was talking about. According to the woman's intuition, Archduchess Tasha was conspiring with the alchemists of the Karsel clan, registered in the association. They acted as if any communication with her would be something terrible for them. But Raymond was different from all of them. Although the boy was not part of the association, he still belonged to the Karsel family, and he was an alchemist, so he could easily take advantage of the loopholes in the system. Of course, it was his fault that Nivea lost her recipes and sense of smell, but he didn't want fleeting emotions to interfere with his work. His first priority now was to open a business and make it successful. Karina noticed that Nivea had changed a lot since their first meeting, as if she had spread her wings. She told the woman that she was indeed a strong person. Now Nivea has definitely decided that she will believe in her strength and that of her daughter, and move forward. As Karina thought, choosing Nivea as her partner was the best decision. If so, it's time to contact Raymond and use their contract. However, although the princess agreed to cooperate with him, she was against Nivea meeting the boy in person. Karina hoped the woman would accept her as a mediator. Although they will be strategic allies now, in the future it is necessary to take proper revenge. The girl visited Raymond to inform him of a matter that would require his help. The mage laughed that, even though they signed the contract, he was not her servant. Moreover, his magical powers had already returned, so he should have taken the guard and left. Karina said that he was simply afraid that she would force him to do something strange, and the boy immediately began to deny it. The girl handed him several sheets of paper with information. Here she structured everything he had to do. The princess agreed to cover all expenses associated with the research. Raymond was surprised by such an order, because the girl could have asked people from her family for this. He was a mage and aspired to the place of the great owner of the magic tower, so he was not eager to participate in some kind of alchemy deal. As a child, he was a brilliant alchemist, but one way or another, no matter how much he hated this science now, no matter how badly he treated his family, Karina didn't care, because they had signed a contract, and he could not disobey her. Raymond rubbed his neck, where the seal was, and promised that she would know what would happen as soon as the contract expired. Karina had already prepared an agreement, and all he had to do was sign it. All materials for the research were prepared. The boy just had to carry out the research, as indicated in the papers. Raymond still signed the contract, although he believed that the girl was behaving arrogantly. By Karina's order, the guard had to stay with the mage for some more time, because he needed an eye on him. He might be plotting something, not waiting for the contract to expire or stealing secret recipes. No one knew what he had on his mind. Raymond became alarmed because it made him uncomfortable to have a stranger in the house with him. But the guard, who was comfortably sitting in Raymond's chair, was very comfortable. The experiment was supposed to start next week. The conversation ended, and Karina headed for the exit. While the girl was sorting the papers in her room, Lily brought her tea. Lately, the princess has been working a lot and hasn't rested due to the opening of the boutique. Since she successfully closed a deal today, Lily suggested that she get some good rest. But the girl still didn't know the best way to organize the space on the third floor of the boutique. Before the royal household began, it was necessary to supervise the construction of the building, check customer addresses, monitor perfume development, and develop packaging designs. In addition, Raymond had many enemies, and according to the guards, everyone, the second person wanted to kill him. Of course, Karina was not particularly concerned about his fate, but information about his recipes could have leaked. So it was necessary to study who was associating with the boy. The princess was right, but she worked so hard and was constantly busy that Lily was worried about her. So she asked her to rest and take a bath, and she would give her a massage. Karina jumped happily from her seat, because that was exactly what she needed. On the third floor, they could open a spa with massages, for which products of their brand would be used. Lily screamed in despair because she told the girl about the vacation, and she was still thinking about work. Apparently, being an entrepreneur was in Karina's blood. That same day, the emperor was having tea in one of the halls of his palace. The unexpected thing was that he wanted to meet Mrs. Pioneer and not her daughter. The woman hinted that she didn't have much free time. Aster had heard that Lord Raymond had recently trespassed into the duchy, and he didn't understand why the woman was so lenient with him. Karina's mother frowned, not understanding what he was talking about. She didn't spare her hair for her daughter's sake, but everything seemed fine with Raymond. The emperor knew that Raymond hated the princess, and he believed that Mrs. Pioneer also knew it, so she must have set a trap for him that suppressed magical powers. The woman asked him if he meant that was why he allowed Raymond to threaten her daughter. She even wished she could say no, but she was also worried about her lover. Mrs. Pioneer thought that His Majesty was dating her daughter for political reasons, so she was surprised that humanity was not alien to him. What she regretted most in her life was introducing Raymond to her daughter, because she thought they were made for each other. They were not like other children, they behaved like adults. As if hiding something, at the same time, they were very similar in their unusual manner, and their inability to mix with others. The woman was mistaken. She was not only a bad mother, but she also inflicted incurable mental wounds on her only daughter. In this case, the emperor didn't understand why she left Raymond as a candidate for the owner of the magic tower. Because the mage had the right to eliminate candidates, Mrs. Pioneer said it didn't matter, because Raymond would not become the owner of the magic tower in any way. About 10 years ago, she and Raymond met in the old Carcel laboratory. The woman had to pick up an order assigned to this laboratory and accidentally stumbled upon the boy. Raymond seemed too young to be one of the workers, so she wondered who he would be. One of the employees told her that he was the son of the Carcel family. They said he was a real talent in the field of alchemy, which is why he was assigned here. The boy was very thin, seemed covered in scars and wounds from injections. Unfortunately, at that time Mrs. Pioneer couldn't talk to him. According to the laboratory rules, only other employees could contact the workers. Then, using magical power, she sent a flower petal from the second floor to the first floor directly into the boy's hands. The woman thanked the employee for the order and quickly walked away. So, Raymond still didn't understand what had happened. At night, on the third floor of the research center, in one of the rooms for test subjects, a boy lay on a bed looking at a petal. The object shone and then filled the room with a bright pink light. At that very second, Freya Pioneer, the same woman who visited his laboratory during the day, appeared in front of Raymond. She explained that she was just a mage passing by and asked what the young genius alchemist was called. The boy introduced himself as Carcel 30-627. It sounded more like a house address than a name. In any case, after their meeting, Freya decided to look at some documents from his laboratory. It turned out they were conducting secret, but very interesting experiments called Project Mage. Children who had little or no knowledge of magic were injected with illegally synthesized magical power through alchemy, after which it began to regenerate in the body. This is how an artificially created mage was obtained. The result of the experiment is the death of all 11 test subjects, except the boy. And although he is the only one left, he only has half the success. No matter how many drugs Carcel was fed, he still had very little magical power. The boy was 11 or 12 years old, about the same age as Freya's daughter. She didn't understand how a teenager could be so thin and handed him a bun to at least eat something. The boy immediately pounced on the food. Apparently, they didn't feed him here. Freya didn't know how to tell him what she was about to say. Most likely, Carcel would have died before reaching puberty, even if the foolish alchemists worked with him. But for the woman, as a talented mage, everything was obvious. It was not true that he had little magical power. She directed the boy's energy towards herself to assess its quantity. The problem was that she received a huge amount of magic, which he did not know how to control. If he has so much magic in him, at some point he, just like his little comrades, will explode and die. Tears streamed down the boy's face, but Freya didn't want to scare him so much. She promised that she would tell him how to survive, but in return, Carcel must not tell anyone that she helped him. This secret must be kept for the rest of his life. From that day on, every night, she had to teach him to control magic so that he could escape the laboratory. After escaping, the boy had to go to the Mages Association and show a letter of recommendation when he became a member of the association. It would be difficult for the alchemists to harm him, but on the other hand, it would also become an enemy of the Carcel family, and he would live like a tramp. Carcel 3627 was even ready to renounce his surname, but it was worth keeping it. In the future, if he has any power, This surname will be useful to him when the truth is revealed. A name made up of numbers could not be used in documents, so Freya racked her brains on how to name the boy. After going through different options, they finally settled on Carcel Raymond. So, Raymond became part of the Mages Association, and even a candidate for the position of next owner of the Magic Tower. In fact, the Carcel family's experiment only had a half success. The first law of alchemy stated that to receive something, you must give something of equal value. Raymond was born as an ordinary boy without magic, but now he possessed enormous magical power. He became a candidate for the place of the owner of the Magic Tower, and all this thanks to the magic created by alchemy. Over time, he would have to pay for it. Karina, led by servants, approached the boy to give him research materials. Blood flowed from Raymond's mouth. Thanks to Freya teaching him to use magic, he was lucky enough to survive and become an adult. But very little time remained until the moment of reckoning. On the threshold, the princess, who heard a cough, was greeted by a guard. Raymond was inside, but his health left much to be desired, so it was worth calling a doctor. At that very second, the guy fell to the floor, scaring everyone. Karina sat at the head of the bed where the mage lay. She raised her hand towards Raymond, and he immediately grabbed it, apparently deciding that this was Tasha. While asleep, he muttered that he would try and asked not to be left behind. The girl asked the guard if anything could have happened before her arrival, but none of that happened. At least in the morning, everything was fine with Raymond, and suddenly he started coughing up blood. Besides this, the guy wanted to talk about something else. It was about the contract killers he mentioned last time. According to him, most of them were sent by the Carcel family, to which Raymond himself belonged. Karina was interested in what kind of things one had to do for their own family to try to kill you. And upon waking up immediately, the mage declared that it was all her business. Raymond couldn't understand why he fainted, because he never had any health problems, so he continued to pretend that he was the strongest and justified the fainting by saying that he was just a little tired. In this case, Karina asked him if he wanted to let go of her hand, and he immediately withdrew it. It seemed that his condition had returned to normal, so he prepared to leave. The doctor was supposed to come soon, and the girl asked Raymond to treat him until he fully recovered. Initially, she wanted to give him some materials related to alchemy, so she left everything on the table so that he could get to work as soon as he recovered. But today, the boy was able to heal and rest. Raymond was surprised to be able to rest, although, of course, he could not work normally due to his condition. Karina handed him a bottle of aromatic oil that helped with fatigue. Lily prepared it with her own hands, so it was even a pity to give it away. Although if the boy died before finishing the work, it would be sad. The girl headed for the exit, and Raymond began to make sounds as if he was about to say thank you. Although, of course, this was beyond his capabilities, so the boy told her not to expect gratitude from him. Karina advised him to accept the oil simply as a gift, start researching, and meet the schedule. Since Raymond considered himself a brilliant mage, he promised that he would make the cosmetics even better than they deserved. When the girl finally left, a blush spread across her face. The boy couldn't believe that he had presented himself to the princess in such a miserable state. In her chambers, Tasha examined the ring Raymond gave her. It seems the product was intended for men because it was too big. That time, Ray told her he would help her, but then he disappeared, so the girl was sure that by giving him the ring, he was just trying to get rid of her this way, and that's all. Tasha got a headache again. Lately, every time she thought about something serious, a migraine immediately overcame her. Andrew decided to enter the room at the wrong time. The girl silently threw the magic ring into the rest of the jewelry. The husband was heading to the palace because the imperial house season was about to begin. Karina also had to be present because the house was an official event, and it was also the first imperial house since Emperor Aster ascended the throne. It would be strange to have a romantic relationship with the emperor and not attend such an event. In this case, Tasha also volunteered for ire. Andrew asked his wife to explain what she was thinking, and the girl reminded him of her promise to make him emperor. She asked him to trust her and promised him that she would return everything he had lost. Raymond read the letter sent by Karina, in which she asked him to fulfill his promise at the imperial house. Looking at the bottle of oil, he apologized to someone because he had already made a decision. In the guest room of the estate, Tasha and Gilhelm discussed how things were going with the boutique. The boy did everything exactly as she said, so buyers had no end. And the perfume bearing her name was almost completely sold out a day after the start of sales. The heir of the Carcel family, Ethan, also contributed to their success by spreading the rumor that Tasha constantly used this fragrance. So everyone rushed to buy it. At this rate, soon everyone would forget about Karin's perfumes, which were much talked about, but they were impossible to acquire. Like a cheerful puppy, Wilhelm stated that his beloved was not only beautiful, but also talented. And the word perfection was invented especially for her. She learned from acquaintances that pre-orders for a limited collection of Karina's fragrance had opened. So Tasha was interested in knowing if there was any news about the opening of a perfume boutique. Wilhelm knew from the association that Karina planned to postpone the inauguration to a later date. So the boy believed that she got scared and ran away with her tail between her legs. Tasha, on the contrary, thought that her ex-girlfriend had come with another vile plan. The lover supported the girl, saying that unlike her, who was honest and sincere, there was always something vile and base about the princess. Titi got up from her seat and walked away, but Wilhelm stopped her and offered to IR with him to check how her boutique was doing. He was clearly overestimating himself, and the girl said that she and Andy had things to do today. This time, the Archduke appeared more opportunely than ever. He was concerned about why the knight was not training. Tasha, placing her hand on the boy's shoulder, with a bead of sweat running down her face from overexertion, replied that they were solving problems related to the boutique, but that the room was free now. When Will ran out, slamming the door, Andrew noticed that he was looking at his wife with the gaze of a loyal puppy, as if she were his owner and not him. The Archduke left before dark, and Tasha grabbed his arm, trying to stop him. The boy withdrew his hand and accidentally pushed the girl to the floor. He asked her to refrain from unnecessary touching, and Tasha apologized. It's okay, she should have had a chance. In the third quarter, on Biris Commercial Street, the Archduke and Archduchess walked amidst the cheerful comments of passers-by. At some point, the girl heard someone suggest that all this was just a facade, because according to rumors, things were not so easy for them. She looked around, but there was no one around. To Tasha's surprise, her husband took her by the hand and invited her for another walk. He believed that the more people saw them together, the better the opinion of them would be. This way, they would also attract more attention to themselves, which would also benefit them. The passers-by reacted quickly. Two girls immediately ran up to the couple. The last time they saw the Duke was at a masquerade ball, and they wondered what he was doing here. Tasha explained that her husband is usually busy, fulfilling his duties at the palace. So only today they had time and decided to have a date. The girls squealed with joy, but regretted that the center of the street was blocked on such a wonderful day. Some aristocrat paid an enormous sum to all the boutiques in the first quarter and rented that part of the street for the day. They said he arranged all this for his beloved, such unlimited love. Now the girls decided to find out when the couple plans to have children. They believed that if such a wonderful couple had a child, it would be simply marvelous. The emperor was not yet married, and if they had a successor, he would become the crown prince. Tasha put her arms around her husband's shoulders and told the girls that for now she would like to spend more time exclusively in the company of the others. Andrew laughed as if he was embarrassed in public, but that was too much. The children were useless, because the man himself was going to take the place of the emperor as soon as he killed Astor. Subsequently, he planned to divorce and return to her, Karina, who at that moment approached the couple. Tasha was not at all happy to meet her, and Andrew was a little embarrassed not knowing why the princess was here. It's even curious that, being the same family as the emperor, they didn't know that today in the first quarter. She was meeting with His Majesty. With difficulty, Tasha, who had held out until that moment, shouted that it was a lie. Having expressed her emotions, the girl finally realized that she had made a mistake. Titi could not afford to let Karina dance with a man she couldn't have. Someone like her simply couldn't date the emperor. Andrew found a way out of the situation by saying that the Duchess and the princess were old friends. Moreover, Tasha was now part of the imperial family, and at the same time, the Duchess did not know about her meeting with His Majesty, which probably hurt the girl a lot. Titi confirmed how happy she was that her close friend was dating the emperor, but for a moment she thought it was a lie, so she felt a little unpleasant, and that's when she accidentally burst out. Of course, Karina found this performance amusing. She was not obliged to report anything about her relationship. Moreover, she was already late for the meeting, so she was in a hurry to leave her friends. The girl took a couple of steps forward and Tati stopped her ex-friend and asked her to accompany her. She and the emperor were a family. But lately, His Majesty has been so busy that they haven't been able to see each other at all. The Duchess would like to meet him and greet him. Even though Karina was stressed by the current situation, she still replied that the girl could do whatever she wanted. As they walked together down the street, Tati looked at the princess. Her appearance attracted attention, but she was still boring and cold, alone. The girl couldn't understand why the emperor kept dating such a foolish person because, no matter how you look at it, she was better than her. Andrew, who already knew his wife's reactions, understood that now she was thinking of something vile. Finally, the trio approached the emperor, and Karina greeted him by touching his hand. Of course, the boy was not so happy with the rest of the arrivals. After bowing, they also greeted His Majesty. Aster decided not to interfere in the couple's meeting and said goodbye to them. But Tati stopped him. Rubbing the bead, the girl started recounting that since she was little, she and the princess studied at the academy. And they were close friends, between whom there were no secrets. But from the moment their relationship began, many secrets appeared between them. Already starting to cry, Tasha continued that if they hadn't accidentally crossed paths, she wouldn't have known about their relationship. So it seemed to her as if His Majesty was taking her friend away from her. The emperor, who believed that this was a wonderful opportunity for her to become more independent, was kind but unyielding. As an adult, it would be abnormal to know every step of her friend. The girl hesitated for a moment, but immediately, grabbing Aster's sleeve, invited them all to gather and have lunch together. First, it was necessary to establish contact with the emperor. Karina's presence was extremely unpleasant, but this way the emperor could see the difference between them and understand that the Duchess is better than this girl. Tasha added that harmony in the family is very important. When the emperor understands this postulate, his choice will fall on her, and he won't even notice Karina's sudden disappearance. If both Andrew and Aster fell in love with her, she didn't even know which one she would make emperor. The space around her filled with Aster's loud laughter. Family harmony was an incredibly funny concept in these realities for him. Andrew immediately started apologizing, but there was nothing to apologize for. They were so amused that there was nothing to reproach them for. Before interfering in her childhood friend's relationship, Tasha should have paid more attention to her own family. If the Duke had told his wife a little more about his childhood, those words would not have arisen in her thoughts. For example, if the story is about what exactly the deceased father did to the emperor, or about the second prince, who died as a result of high treason. One could also talk about the day, popularly known as the Prince's Rebellion. Andrew said he would inform the Duchess about this matter, and finally they said goodbye. The emperor apologized for making the princess wait so long. They exchanged only a couple of words, but he was already very clear that Tasha was a disgusting woman. Although Aster sincerely did not understand how men fell for her hypocrisy, Karina was grateful that he did not take her side. It would have been in Tasha's spirit to use the bracelet with the emperor, but for some reason, he was still indifferent to her. Andrew found it funny that the girl asked him for trust, but that was all he could show her. Even with the bracelet, she claimed that what happened was something like training, but she herself began to bite her finger. Nothing like this had ever happened before. A game window appeared in front of Asta, indicating that she could not conquer this object. In fact, the emperor rented the entire first block of Baris Street. He needed to see a house suit that they had sent to be made, but usually there were many people here, and he decided that it might be dangerous. Karina understood that renting an entire block was not an easy task, especially since he probably had to hide his identity. It would have been much more convenient to send the suit directly to the palace. Of course, she was right, but Aster wanted to have a date with her, because after the masquerade ball they could see each other for a long time. The boy decided that perhaps his attention was tiring her, because the girl was busy even without it. But Karina was happy to have the opportunity to take a break from a bunch of things and worries. Aster was not the same, as if the princess offended him for something. How nice it would be to get into his head now, to understand what he is thinking. The couple met at the door of a workshop called Ladies' Boutique. The man who welcomed them inside was on his knees and elbows on the floor, diligently serving the guests. He assumed that in front of him were the aristocratic nobles, because money was floating a kilometer away from them. The only thing left was to scam the guests out of large sums of money, leaving them without a single penny. For each of them, 10 samples of suits had already been prepared, corresponding to the measurements taken, so the couple just had to choose. Aster was surprised because the princess did not need a suit for hunting. At the ball, he agreed that he would accept the hunt he caught. The girl did not have time to say that she also wanted to participate and sent her measurements to the studio. She really often managed to surprise the emperor. In fact, Karina planned to meet Allison while hunting, but she couldn't tell the boy. Otherwise, he would immediately start dissuading her, so she preferred to laugh awkwardly, pretending that she wasn't planning anything. This couldn't last long, so the girl started sending help signals to the employee, discreetly winking at him. Aster tried to ask her something, and the studio representative immediately began to insist that the suits for the fitting were already ready, so the conversation still had to be postponed. Before the emperor returned, some explanation had to be given. From His Majesty's point of view, it might seem that the girl was actually hiding many things, but she was not used to asking others for help or trusting them. During the fire, she acted independently. Although without Andrew's help, her end would have been near. Karina did not tell him about her collaboration with Raymond on a perfume boutique. She also kept silent about the plans related to the opening of the hospital. His Majesty always, without a doubt, simply extended a hand to her. In fact, the fact that she brought Andrew and Tasha with her today was also a surprise to him. If you look at it that way, it might seem like she is a heartless mistress. At that moment, Aster had already changed clothes and appeared in front of the girl so that she could assess how the suit looked on him. Karina gave him a sincere compliment, and the emperor was glad she liked it. Now all that remained was to try on the remaining 9 suits. Of course, the princess would like to look, but when she tried everything on, the sun would have already set. The only solution in this situation was to buy all the suits and then send a person to pick them up. Karina told Aster that they hadn't had a date in a long time, and she would like to go for a walk with him and talk. On the street, a girl was shouting with joy at the top of her lungs. She always wanted to do this at least once, to shout in the very center of the city. The couple hadn't been able to walk calmly for so long without looking at others, and now all this was only thanks to the emperor. However, she believed that this was because the princess took time out of her tight schedule. From that moment on, the girl wanted to be more honest with him. She took Aster's hand, and if he didn't mind, she offered to tell him a story from her past. That happened during her 3rd year at the academy. Then, she and Tasha agreed to do their final project together. But only now, her friend warned that she was on another team. If she had said this earlier, Karina could have already found another team, because if she didn't complete the group project, she threatened to graduate only a year later. Titi also asked to understand her. Daniel had been with her on the team since last year, and Raymond said he refused to work without her. But unfortunately, it was impossible for the 4 of us to complete the task. Then, Daniel offered to leave the team and work with Karina, but she refused, and decided to manage on her own. To be honest, the current situation was familiar to her. For 3 years at the academy, she was constantly left alone. She herself perfectly understood that she was showing excessive credulity, but for some reason, even knowing this, she always remained a fool. Then, after Karina's confrontation with Andrew, the professor called them to discuss their final thesis. A group project was required for its launch, and only their names were not on the list of groups. They could form a team, and the man would include them in the list, and Andrew was delighted with the offer. However, Karina insisted that she wanted to complete the project alone. She didn't care if her grade was lowered. The main thing was to keep the opportunity to graduate. Realizing that the new student Andrew was not sure if he wanted to do the project alone, the professor gave the students until next week to discuss the matter among themselves. He added that for Karina, it would be much more convenient to complete the project in pairs with someone than alone, and a decrease in grades could be avoided, after which he could say goodbye to the boys until the next selection. Andrew asked if the princess would still like to do a project together. He had only recently transferred and had not yet made any friends. Judging by the fact that Andrew Lovron transferred so late, the reason was a rather unpleasant story. In any case, it wouldn't be easy. If he tried to get close to the girl, bad rumors would spread. Karina repeated that she would complete the graduation project alone, so the boy should look for another team, and walked away without even giving him a chance to say anything. Immediately, he was surrounded by other students who believed that Karina was always known for her lack of manners, and talking to her only worsened the mood. They argued that he should join them instead of wasting energy on the girl. Although from Karina's side, this was even a stroke of luck. Every time she appeared among the students, it was a new reason for discussion. Everyone talked behind her back, without even knowing anything about her. They insisted that the reason was her low self-esteem and called her a rude woman. But if she really had such a terrible character, she wouldn't just tolerate insults. Of course, at one point the gossip offended her greatly. But now she didn't care. In any case, there was only one game where everything was created for the main characters. A false world, tears won't help anything, and there was no point in crying and getting angry. So finally, alone among the trees, Karina just took a bite of her sandwich. Let her beloved leave her. Let her close friends walk away. Let them accuse her of things that are not her fault. She doesn't care. While having lunch, the girl heard someone approaching her. It was Andrew, who seemed to have no one around. The girl said she was almost done eating, so he could stay. Realizing that her sandwich had barely been bitten, the new boy hurried to leave. But he still decided to offer to eat together. In any case, no one could see them here, so the girl didn't mind. The silence in which they ate was very uncomfortable, so Karina decided to find out how Andrew was doing with his senior project team. Although the princess thought he joined Sophie and Ruby, the boy still hadn't found anyone, and he refused to join the team with the girls. He didn't want to deal with those who slander someone else without knowing anything about him. And this confused Karina a little. She also found out that they were putting stickers under the sandwich wrappers. And after that day, the girl began to have lunch with Andrew. Gradually, they began to spend more time together, and even though his family's status was much lower, she didn't mind at all. In fact, his low social status meant that he would not be among the main characters. In this regard, Karina was more than happy with the current situation. With Andrew, she felt comfortable, even when they were simply silent. But they could talk about absolutely any topic. In the most difficult moments, only he stood on the girl's side. It's just that next to him, she wasn't the friend of the main character, but herself. It was autumn, and there was one semester left until graduation. But thanks to Andrew, her last year at the academy was full of good memories. People talked about Karina's relationship with him and her social status, but the girl didn't care about the hatred or insults towards her. It's not that she wasn't worried at all, she was just patient. But it hurt her that because of her, Andrew was also being humiliated. At that moment, when the girl shouted at the gossips, a man turned to her. In his hands was a letter sent from the duchy of the pioneer family. After reading the text, Karina was horrified. Troubles had arrived from where it was not expected. Andrew, happy to have met his beloved, immediately changed his face when he saw that she was crying. The letter said that her mother disappeared. This happened a year and a half after her parents' divorce. After the divorce, my mother had no permanent place of residence. She repeatedly moved from place to place due to her research, and during one of them, she disappeared without a trace in the mountains. Now Karina could recall this period with peace of mind, knowing about her safe return. And saved, but then it seemed to her that her world was collapsing. She was afraid that her mother would not return. It's scary when close people leave one after another, and in the end, she is left completely alone. Karina couldn't understand why everyone abandoned her. Maybe she simply shouldn't have been born into this world, and Andrew couldn't imagine how he could say such a thing. Sometimes the girl imagined a world where she was the protagonist, where she had true friends by her side, a man who truly loved her. No one despises her, but appreciates her for her actions. A world where unexpected tragedies do not happen, where every day she is happy. And loved, this is the life of the main character. At that moment, Andrew approached the girl from behind and hugged her, while tears streamed down her cheeks. He promised that he would make her world like that he would always be there, that he would never change, and that he would love her forever. How tender Andrew's confession sounded then, but anxiety grew with the same force in Karina's soul. Because she didn't know if she could trust him. She wanted him to get along with the other boys, but she also wanted to be close. She was eager to trust him and loved him, but she was afraid that he, too, would abandon her. But these thoughts were useless. In any case, Karina, being a supporting character, could do nothing. So it was better not to think about anything. A working day found Tasha. The girl invited her to go with her, and Daniel to a new cafe. But Karina had other plans. Tati knew that it was Andrew who had his plans, so she just said goodbye, deciding that nothing could be done. Insults towards the boy were heard from those around him. The students considered him a gigolo and didn't understand why they were together. Karina thought that Tasha looked at Andrew too closely, as if she were plotting again to take her boyfriend away. The original didn't even have his character, so everything should have been fine. Andrew is far from the main character, so it would be enough if they didn't cross paths again. When the boys started to conflict, Karina said that it wouldn't help, that you couldn't make everyone shut up. In any case, rumors were just rumors. It was enough that they themselves knew the truth. Andrew just wanted to ask them to stop saying such things, and the girl said that the intervention of just one boy from the Viscount's family would not solve anything. Since her words, the princess, were not enough. If it were something easy that she could solve with words, things would be different. She could continue to pretend to be the main character, but in reality, both were extras. She, without understanding why, continued to say what hurt the boy, even though she didn't believe it at all. If he were not a simple guy from a Viscount's family, but a crown prince, maybe everything would have been different. From that day on, Andrew began to spend a lot of time alone. After a while, he said that he actually liked Tasha. The one who promised not to leave her for anything ended up leaving her alone. Then, Karina realized that eternal love does not exist. Therefore, she generally stopped believing in love. The girl believed that His Majesty invited her out not for love, but for political ambitions. But he was always kind to her and supported her, so she wanted to repay him for this. Of course, it would be difficult for her to tell him everything now, but she almost managed to bring Tasha's revenge plan to life. Karina took Aster's hand, giving him permission to use her as well, building an honest relationship. And of mutual benefit, filled with determination, she invited the boy to marry. He already had the greatest military and political power in the empire, but due to the terrors at the beginning of his career, he had a rather low approval rating among citizens. Based on this, the boy needed the support of the aristocracy. To solve this problem, he could influence secular society through Karina's family position. Therefore, to the proposal they made to her on the day of their first meeting, Karina was ready to give a positive answer. However, the emperor's face did not express complete delight. Frustrated, he let go of his hand from the girl's hands. Aster didn't know if he really thought they met for the first time that day. This sentence became a mystery for Karina, but the boy was not going to explain its meaning to her. Come to think of it, hearing such a proposal on the first day of meeting was unusual, and Karina was truly shocked by his words. Of course, this was a surprise to her, especially since she was drunk that day, and she behaved obscenely. But he still helped her, apparently, so the girl really overdid it with alcohol and was not herself. Aster really thought the princess was a very good, intelligent, and interesting woman. However, he still rejected the offer of an engagement. Karina wondered why this was the case, because that was her proposal. Aster explained that they still don't know each other well, so there is no need to rush. But later, they will be able to decide. This was the end of their conversation, and the girl didn't know what else to tell him. While going to a royal house in a carriage with the emperor, she thought about the past conversation. Since he proposed to her, her social status has not changed. Now Karina was not sure that her initiative was initially driven by political motives. Perhaps the recent meeting with Tasha still influenced Aster, and he was just like all men. Finally, the boy broke the silence. He handed the princess a gift box and expected her to accompany him to the house festival. Inside was an incredibly beautiful brooch in the shape of a butterfly. Due to her discomfort, Karina was afraid to even look Aster in the eye. But since he gave her a gift, maybe everything was fine. The girl still didn't understand what the hell he was thinking. On the day of the house festival, she arrived with mixed feelings. Lily could no longer wait for the event. They said the imperial forest was unimaginably beautiful, but Karina had already been there once. A long time ago. It was almost impossible to get there, except for the house festival. But thanks to the princess, the maid could finally see the forest with her own eyes. As a result, Karina, although she did not want to resemble Tasha, still put on the bracelet to see the future of the main characters. The girl decided to find out how interesting Aster was, and immediately take him away. Lily asked if the lady was worried about something. Since the day of her meeting with His Majesty, she hadn't been herself. Karina pretended that everything was in order. Her boutique would open soon. The weather was nice, and the day of the house festival was approaching. It couldn't have been better. She asked the girl not to worry about her. Although the princess didn't know why Aster rejected her that day, she had other important matters to attend to. Finally, the girls met at the assembly point, at the entrance to the imperial forest. Soon, His Imperial Majesty would begin the opening ceremony, and everyone was expected to start. Amid shouts, the emperor walked out to the town to announce the start of the house. Seeing the decoration he was wearing, Karina was a little perplexed. Aster wore exactly the same brooch as the one he gave her. The moment their eyes met, the girl understood the meaning of this brooch. Lily claimed that it was a sign, a symbol of their love and developing relationship, a kind of announcement. It showed everyone that they were together. The emperor was sincerely happy for the opportunity he had to be with everyone in this legendary territory. This forest, called the Golden Forest, according to legend, is the birthplace of God, the creator of their world. This forest is a unique territory where it is impossible to use magic, as the purest magic stones located here absorb a person's magical powers. Therefore, everyone will be able to demonstrate their true abilities, which is the meaning of the imperial house. After today's opening, competitions were to begin. The first day for knights, the second for ladies, and a party was planned for the third day. The emperor wished that everything would go well and wished the participants good results. While Lily was taking the suitcases to her store, Karina decided to look for where the doctor's shop was located. She had an important matter to resolve during this festival: to meet Tasha's attending physician, Allison, and win her over to her side. On the nearby flag was the coat of arms of the Archduke. Of course, such a noble family could not miss the imperial house. Since their wedding, Andrew and Tasha had provided personnel from their estate for every official imperial event, as if they wanted to contain the growing power of the emperor, so one could easily assume that they would provide medical personnel for the house festival as such. Well, while looking for the infirmary, Karina pretended to feel unwell to get help from a female doctor. Until now, the only doctor present here was the doctor attending the Duchess, Lady Allison, so the assistant offered the girl painkillers, although she was counting on a medical consultation. Now it was impossible to get her consultation, unless, of course, urgent help was needed. But a doctor could examine the participant, as Karina thought. Meeting Allison was not easy. At least, she found out that the woman was definitely here. And in order to meet her, without seeming intrusive, it turns out she would have to hurt herself in front of everyone during the competition. Soon Raymond appeared at the festival, looking a little tired. Thanks to Karina, he didn't have a free moment due to her instructions to finish developing the product before the imperial house. Judging by the energy with which he waved his arms, there was no need to worry about his health. In any case, yesterday the girl checked all the developed products, and now all he had to do was fulfill her last promise. During the imperial house, give prey to Karina. Of course, Raymond remembered this. As soon as the house was over, this absurd contract would also end. Although Karina was not sure that with his mediocre skills, he could catch at least someone. The boy would have to try, as he was waiting for the end of the agreement. At that moment, Raymond was completely overwhelmed and shouted that he really hated the girl. In the medical staff tent, Allison asked if Tasha was sure she wanted to participate in the event, given that lately she had been complaining a lot about headaches. The Archduke had been waiting for this event for a long time, so she didn't want to worry him just because of her headache. Allison asked the Duchess to speak immediately if she felt unwell. The woman would be ready at any moment. As soon as Tati came out of the tent, Wilhelm was already nearby and was interested in her well-being. As soon as things were done, he immediately ran here, because he was scared when he found out that she had missed the opening ceremony. And she was here. The girl was not at all delighted with such a meeting, and she hoped that the boy would come with Andrew. The Archduke said that he still had work to do, so he would join a little later. He thought that Wilhelm was so eager for the imperial house that he looked like a child whose parents promised to take him on a picnic, as if he wanted to give up the position of master of the knightly order and become the commander of toy soldiers. Now the boy noticed that something was wrong with Tati. Nearby, he noticed Raymond standing next to Karina, who clearly did not expect to see his beloved at the event. She took his hand and told him that they needed to talk. The young people entered the Archduke's tent, and Bill, annoyed by the appearance of a new object of Tasha's attention, he tried to figure out what they were doing inside. The girl was not sure if she could use the ring Raymond gave her, because they said that magic did not work in the Golden Forest. It is true that the Golden Forest absorbed a person's magical powers, but it could not block the functions of artifacts made of magic stones. In this case, if Karina was killed with the help of the ring, it would be an ideal crime. Upon hearing such words from Tasha, Raymond asked her to return this ring to him. He suggested that he would do it himself, because it was dangerous for a girl to do something like that alone. Tati didn't understand if Ray was also taking her for a fool. He promised to help and then disappeared. He didn't let her participate in his plans, and now he wanted to take away the ring they had gifted her. Raymond shouted that he was doing everything possible only for her, and initially contacted Karina to get closer to her. Seeing the level of the boys' sympathy, Tasha suggested that the problem was their feelings, that they faded so easily once they were separated for a while. Holding the bracelet, the girl shed tears and declared that he, too, would leave her in the end. Raymond swore that he would always be sincere with her, and that, for her happiness, he would agree to do anything. And the level of her sympathy immediately began to rise. In this case, Tasha asked for his help, because she could only find happiness when Karina disappeared. The boy took her hands. Since the day he first saw Tati's tears, she was the natural owner of his heart. However, he could not allow this to happen. So, begging her to forgive him, he snatched the ring away. The men gathered at the starting point of the house, at the entrance to the Golden Forest. Among them, Karina could not find Aster, although she tried because she wanted to talk. Yesterday, for some reason, she was surrounded by a crowd of people, and she couldn't even communicate normally with him. Before, if anything, people only avoided her, which means that the power of the original plot might be weakening. Finally, the couple's eyes met, and Aster asked why the princess had arrived so early. Yesterday, she couldn't greet him properly, so she decided to meet a minute before the start of the competition between the men. Of course, it was nothing compared to the brooch he gave her, but the girl cultivated the flower with magic and gave it to Aster, casting a preservation spell so that it would not wither. The girl was worried that the gift was not very good because she had little magical power, and her aptitude for magic was not great, but it was enough. The emperor was very happy. Karina achieved an excellent result. This flower was perfect. Blushing, she noticed that the boy was also wearing a pair of brooches today. He even forgot to tell you that when they both wear brooches, he immediately knows if something happened to the girl. So if she gets into a dangerous situation, he will always come to her aid. Thanks to this, Karina could not worry about anything and simply enjoy the festival. Last night, Raymond took the ring away from Tasha and threw it away. The girl, who was not willing to give it to anyone, immediately ran to the jewelry and almost caught them. At that moment, she found herself at the feet of her husband, Andrew Lovron of Gloucester. He didn't know how to understand the fact that his wife was running like a dog after the ring given to her by another man. Tasha excused herself by saying that she was very greedy. Raymond gave her the ring and then took it away, so she got angry. Then Andrew said that instead of this trinket, he would buy her hundreds of others with larger diamonds, and that he would step on this one and break it. The girl shouted at him to stop, covering the product with her hands. For the Archduke, this was no longer something new, so he didn't even have the strength to get angry. He was only surprised by how much his wife valued the ring given to her by another man. He really could hurt feelings that he didn't have. I don't even have it for her. If she planned to behave so vulgarly in the future, it would be better for them to divorce. Unable to bear such pressure, Tati admitted that it was an artifact, that this is not an ordinary ring, but something extremely precious with a magic stone. With its help, even in the Golden Forest, it was possible to use the magic of consciousness change. Tasha still had to say that she was going to get rid of Karina with the help of the ring. Then, upon learning about the magical properties of the jewelry, Andrew confiscated them from his wife. Before the house, he put it on without the slightest doubt. Perhaps his dream was about to come true sooner than he thought. The royal hunt has begun, and men are rushing to test their skills. Andrew killed the prey first. His Majesty arrived only a fraction of a second late. A moment later, the bullet flew past the Archduke's ear. This time he hesitated, and the prize went to the Emperor. It was already dark in the area. After shooting a decent amount of different creatures, they walked in one direction together. The boys stopped at the cliff, and Aster noticed that today he was experiencing something strange. He didn't know if it was something new or familiar. But as soon as they met, Andrew's face seemed to contort in fear. However, today he looked at the Emperor in the same way as the deceased second prince, who wanted to take his place. Aster aimed the gun at the Archduke's head, but he didn't even move. By activating the ring, Andrew said that this place never belonged to his brother. If his father hadn't been killed then, he wouldn't have been able to get the throne. The Emperor was not sure if he was aware of the responsibility of the words spoken, and the Duke immediately corrected himself. If Aster hadn't killed his father then, he would have inherited the throne, and his brother would have knelt before him. The man immediately fell to his knees, and the gun fell from his hands. He could not control his body, as if it were stone or alien. Everything floated, and the emperor realized that Andrew was using an artifact that altered consciousness. The duke was glad to have finally shown his true nature, the face of a murderer. The death of his mother was not enough for him. He was barely born. He also took the lives of his father and brothers. Bloody Emperor was too strong a nickname. Andrew considered him simply a murderer, stained with blood from birth. So both the imperial throne and Karina belonged to him from the beginning. Taking advantage of the situation, the guy pushed his brother off the cliff to return everything he believed belonged to him by right. He trampled on the flower Karina gave him and said goodbye to Aster, sending him to his ancestors.